Hello everyone, I'm very glad that you listened to my story. Please give me a follow and like the video if you enjoyed it. Feel free to comment and provide feedback so I can improve the sound quality. Yes, I will now continue the unfinished story. Chapter 63, Are You Ever Afraid? None of the other people noticed Lin Sanjia blatantly appearing before the two executives because everyone was busy, but this was something no one would even imagine. Marcy was sprinting when suddenly an intense draft erupted in front of her. Bang! Somehow, Marcy's head collided with the empty space ahead, and she nearly fell. She reached out and realized that there was an invisible wall, but she did not know how far it stretched. Holding her slightly injured nose, she turned to look at Chen Jinfeng, who was just a few meters away. He couldn't help smiling as he wrung his hands with a sick satisfaction. He stepped a few steps toward her and said, "Look. Here we meet once again." Marcy eyed him coldly. She placed her hands down and extended her nails. Despite the light streaming from the searchlights above, it was difficult to spot Marcy's extended nails, which now lacked a reflective metallic surface. Only Marcy herself could see that the nails on both her last fingers had broken off, leaving two missing extensions. But Chen Jinfeng paid no heed to her display of aggression. His eyes lingered on her bosom before he laughed, "Just so you know, I've seen Septimus." That statement caught Marcy's attention. "I guess you two are still on bad terms. I met him just this morning. He told me the reason why you disappeared and even gave me a little information about your nails." There was a loathsome smile on Chen Jinfeng's face as he spoke with a syrupy tone. "As long as I break off your nails one by one, you won't be able to hurt me, right?" 12 went to look for Chen Jinfeng? Where is he now? Marcy knew that Chen Jinfeng would not answer her questions, so she didn't bother asking. "If you think you can evade my nails, then go ahead and try," she uttered monotonously. Chen Jinfeng's smile visibly waned, then he clapped twice. As the sound he made faded, rings of colors radiated from where they stood. In less than a second, their entire surroundings changed entirely. The poorly lit factory compound disappeared and was replaced by a forest filled with a collection of weird plants. The sun was shining above, and the ground was covered by wild grass. Marcy was standing at a rather open area, she could even see a swath of blue sky through the canopy. Chen Jinfeng was no longer standing where he was just moments before. Now, there were only a few small yellow flowers in that spot. Marcy took a few cautious steps forward, she placed all her focus on listening to her surroundings. She was trying to see if she could hear any movements nearby. Chen Jinfeng's voice came down suddenly from the blue sky above. "The territory I showed you previously was just the basic version of my ability. I am using my full power today. How is it? Beautiful, right?" Once he finished his sentence, a shadow spun rapidly toward Marcy. It was extremely fast, but at the same time, its speed created a very faint sound of rushing air. Marcy only realized its presence when it was just at the back of her head. She instantly dodged by turning her head. The unknown thing flew past her face and landed on the ground. A streak of blood slowly appeared on the tip of Marcy's nose. Still startled, Marcy stared at the item and discovered that it was just a wildflower. The petals of the hardened wildflower were wide open, and each of them had a sharp blade-like edge. Once it rotated, it was just like a beautiful meat grinder. Marcy picked up the flower and tested it on her hair. A few red locks of hair fell to the ground. "Ha ha! How is it? Isn't it pretty good? Let me tell you something. I can convert everything within my territory into a weapon. It is not just that wildflower you're holding." Marcy tried to locate the direction where the voice originated from. But the very next second, Marcy found herself running as fast as she could as multiple flat blade-like fragments fell from the sky almost as if chasing her. She only stopped when she had run about 20 meters. When she turned to look behind, she saw multiple flat hardened clouds sticking out from the ground. F***ck. That is really everything. Marcy thought to herself as she quickly examined her entire surroundings. Even though the sky seemed boundless, and the forest seemed to go on forever, Marcy knew that this illusory territory must have a boundary, as it should still be constrained by the natural laws of reality. She remembered that when they were in the infirmary, that illusory territory was only the size of a single room. At that time, she could still hear noises from outside the room. Despite the fact that this place was not as large as it appeared, the main problem was that she did not know where Chen Jinfeng was hiding. Now Chen Jinfeng's voice rang out again. The instant Marcy reacted, she saw a green shadow coming toward her. She dodged with a somersault, only to realize that the attack was not aimed at her but only her hand. The vine which attacked her stopped in mid-air. It shook and two long nails it held dropped to the ground. Marcy looked at her nails and discovered that the nails of her left ring finger and middle finger had been broken off. "You only have 8 nails left," Chen Jinfeng amplified his gloating voice. "After I get rid of all your nails, I will come out to see you. We'll have some fun then, won't we?" Chen Jinfeng had gotten it wrong. Marcy only had 6 nails left. She could feel a bead of cold sweat rolling down her forehead. She was getting anxious. She knew that she could not withdraw her nails as they were her last line of defense. Where could he be? Marcy searched her pockets, but it was disappointing. During their time here in Oasis, she already grew accustomed to the presence of electrical lights, so she didn't even have a lighter on her. If she did, she might just try to burn the place down. Just then, she spotted a black shadow from the corner of her eyes. Marcy had no idea what it was, but she didn't dare to use her nails. Her only option was to run. When she turned to run, she did not expect to see over 10 branches whizzing toward her. She panicked, quickly fell to the ground and rolled to one side as she protected her head with her hands. Great. Only 7 left. Chen Jinfeng laughed. Another of Marcy's nail broke when it stuck onto one of the branches. 5. That was the actual numbers of nails left. She had 2 nails on her left hand and 3 on her right. Huh. Marcy suddenly stood still. The sun in Chen Jinfeng's territory was not overly intense, but sunlight spilled throughout the entire place. She could see the green leaves and branches of the trees. She could see the azure blue sky. She could see everything clearly. The amount of light far exceeded that in the dim darkness in Oasis. Yet, she realized that Chen Jinfeng did not know the exact number of nails left on her fingers. Is he hiding behind something so he can't see? Marcy gulped. If she just defended herself passively like this, she would become a sitting duck once all her fingernails were broken. If so, she would rather take a risk. Her heartbeat soared, and she could even feel the tremors through her chest. Marcy looked to both sides. Suddenly, she sprinted toward the thick forest. This time, she didn't hold back. Running at her fastest speed, she raced toward the forest, leaving a series of afterimages behind. Behind her, countless grass, leaves, branches, and flowers floated up in mid-air, covering almost half the sky. It was quite a sight to behold. "Oh? You are trying to hide?" Marcy did not know if she was imagining things, but Chen Jinfeng's tone seemed a little different. Shortly after, the hundreds of weaponized flora and fauna followed her into the forest with a swoosh. The threat did not only come from behind in that instant. Chen Jinfeng also started to weaponize the branches and leaves in the forest. Marcy could see the menacing amount of razor-sharp edges gathering before her. They rained down upon her. Marcy, herself, did not know how she managed to move forward. Her forearms were covered in blood as she used them to protect her head and face, and some of the cuts on her body were so deep that they reached her bones. A few steel-like flowers had embedded themselves in her thigh, so every painful step forward felt as if the nerves in her legs were screaming for her to stop. Needless to say, her clothes were in tatters after that hurricane-like attack, exposing her fair skin and bleeding wounds. Despite that, Chen Jinfeng did not make a single comment about her half-exposed state. Instead, his voice sounded more and more strained, with even a hint of desperation. 6, 5, 4. He was counting down the number of nails. 3. When he said that, Marcy only had one extended nail left. The seemingly endless forest finally stopped at a river. There were a few ripples in the river, and it was sprinkled with the reflection of a few golden sun rays. As she looked at the river, Marcy saw the reflection of her own bloodied face with her slightly sinister smile. She managed to protect her last remaining nail. No matter how vicious the previous attacks were, Chen Jinfeng could no longer continue counting. "I've found you at last." Just as she said that, someone rose up from the surface of the idyllic river, and water spewed everywhere. The person jumped out and ran in the opposite direction. "So you do get scared?" Marcy sneered. She had never felt this much energy coursing through her body. Under the dazzling azure sky, a woman covered in blood leaped into the air as her prey scrambled on the ground. For a moment, it was as if everything froze in a picture-perfect scene. Chen Jinfeng felt a sharp burning pain shoot through his back and saw a glimpse of a drop of his blood. Just when he screamed, "No!" the sunlight disappeared. The blue sky disappeared. The grass, the forest, the river, everything blurred and gradually faded from his sight. Once again the poorly lit building in the factory compound reappeared. The scathing hot air surrounded him, each agonizing breath was like self-torture. Even before he could feel the pain from his skin which came in direct contact with the ground, he could see white smoke accompanied with the smell of burnt flesh. So this is how it feels to be a person without a heat resistance adaptation. Chen Jinfeng gasped violently like a fish out of the water. He felt as if his insides were disintegrating. Without warning, he felt a foot pressing down heavily on his throat. "Here, we meet once again." Marcy lowered her head, peering down at him. Even though she was covered with cuts from head to toe, she looked serene. "But, I really don't wish to see you again." "No. No, please, please." Marcy had no reason to spare him. Her remaining sharp nail easily pierced through Chen Jinfeng's forehead just as if it were tofu. Chapter 64, Many Explosions and a Sob Story. Lucky. The same word was said at the same time by two different people at two different locations. One of them was Hu Chenzhe, who was facing Hai Tianqing, the other was Fang Dan, who was facing the Yuppie. 3:02 a.m., northeastern corner of Oasis. "Twerp, you think you're lucky." A blue vein on Hai Tianqing's forehead starting throbbing, while he held an axe. The blood vessels on the back of his hand also started bulging. He spat so hard on the floor that his spittle hit the ground like a bullet, to the extent that it raised a small cloud of dust. "Let's see if you still think so in 5 minutes, he threatened as he looked down at Hu Chenzhe contemptuously. Hu Chenzhe pushed up his spectacles, pretending that he was calm, but he took 2 steps backward. His neck felt a little numb because he had to look upwards to see Hai Tianqing's face. This was his first time standing so close to someone of that stature. Can someone with such an enormous frame still be considered a human? Hu Chenzhe wasn't considered tall by any means, but he was at least 1.78 m. Despite that, when he stood in front of Hai Tianqing, the top of his head barely reached his opponent's waist. That man's shoulders were so wide that it was thrice the length of Hu Chenzhe's, and the rippling muscles of his neck and back resembled a small mountain. At first glance, it was obvious that the man possessed an incredible amount of physical strength. Even that axe in Hai Tianqing's hand was a marvel, as it was the same height as Hu Chenzhe. Hu Chenzhe wondered how Hai Tianqing even managed to find something like that. "Well, Executive Hai," Hu Chenzhe called Hai Tianqing by his title, unable to immediately change his habit. "To be honest, I still haven't developed any physical enhancements," Hu Chenzhe confessed. The man in front of him, who resembled a small mountain, fell silent for a second. "What? You're telling me that your physique is still that of a normal person?" Hai Tianqing said in astonishment as he planted his large face beside Hu Chenzhe. Hu Chunzai nodded grudgingly. So, you are planning to just surrender? Hai Tianqing thought of this possibility. I can't. If I get captured, it would be troublesome for the others. Hai Tianqing straightened his back. All right. Don't blame me for being merciless since you chose to side with those traitors of humankind. He lifted the axe and asked, do you have any last words? Hu Chunzai shook his head. He could feel his calves trembling. As he watched the axe being raised higher and higher, he clenched his teeth and rushed headfirst toward Hai Tianqing's waist. Hai Tianqing didn't even raise a brow. With his left hand, he grabbed Hu Chunzai's neck and lifted him off the ground. Hu Chunzai kicked his legs as he hung in mid-air. He could literally feel the oxygen being squeezed out from him. His face turned purple in less than 2 seconds. He continued struggling, feeling his consciousness slowly fading. He tried to pull himself away by grabbing onto Hai Tianqing's muscular wrist. However, that bit of resistance was but a drop in the bucket. It felt like nothing to Hai Tianqing. A puzzled look appeared on Hai Tianqing's face. This was most likely because he could not understand why Hu Chunzai would even bother struggling at this point. Just then, he heard the young man, who he held like a small sparrow in his hand, mumbling something. He could not hear him clearly. What? You lied yesterday, Hu Chunzai said weakly through his gritted teeth. Before Hai Tianqing could react, he felt as if there was something within his left wrist. A visible bump appeared under the skin of his arm, and it moved toward his shoulder following his blood flow. Hai Tianqing quickly threw down his axe and tried to stop the lump using his right hand. Boom! The bump moved too quickly for him. As he tried to press down on it, the area near his left shoulder was torn open by a small explosion. Blood, flesh, skin, and pieces of tendons flew outwards with the sound of an explosion creating a rain of blood. Blood spattered all over Hu Chunzai. Hai Tianqing's entire left arm was now deformed. He sat on the ground and managed to painfully utter a question. He was not concerned about his wound, nor the weird bump. Instead, he asked, how did you know about that lie? Hu Chunzai fell to the ground. He coughed a few times feebly. He could still feel his lungs burning with pain. I don't know what you lied about. But from the looks of your wounds, that must be quite a big lie. Hu Chunzai's ability, Truth Bomb. Introduction. After Hu Chunzai's lie detection ability advanced, he can now detect if anyone has lied in the past 24 hours. Once it is confirmed that the target has lied in the past 24 hours, Hu Chunzai can plant a truth bomb through skin contact. The greater the gravity of the lie and the shorter the time passed, the more powerful the explosion of the truth bomb would be. The truth bomb would travel to the target's heart but would explode on the spot if something interfered with it. Hai Tianqing's wound was relatively close to his heart. He breathed heavily and grinned mockingly at himself. Who would have known? I thought that I was quite good at combat, but I was defeated so quickly by a person like you. I underestimated you. Will I die? Hu Chunzai could not tell. Even though he survived alone for some time before he reached Oasis, he had never killed anyone. If Hai Tianqing really died, that man would be the first living person he had murdered. When he thought of this, Hu Chunzai's expression worsened. He caught his breath and managed to stand, planning to just walk away. Ha! Hai Tianqing exclaimed abruptly when he saw Hu Chunzai turning his back to him. He covered his own eyes with his uninjured arm. I can't believe it, I'm going to die like this without a chance to take revenge, he mumbled softly to himself, and by the hands of this traitor of humankind. Hu Chunzai paused and turned his head. His face was still slightly purplish from the lack of oxygen. I'm just curious. What did you lie about yesterday? 3:02 a.m., Oasis, West. Fang Dan didn't say a single word as she looked at the man in front of her. It wasn't because she had nothing to say, but she couldn't speak and couldn't move because the yuppie was too close to her. She could feel the man's warm breath by the side of her ear. The yuppie held a lock of long black hair between his fingers. You're Fang Dan, right? He sounded indifferent as he said this. From the information we have on you, you arrived very early at Oasis. Even though you are a natural post-human, you don't have any outstanding abilities. Neither do you have any physical enhancements. Fang Dan bit her lips as she tried her best to keep her legs from growing weak. The yuppie was one of the 5 executives after all. He appeared to be narcissistic and unscrupulous. She could feel her blood rushing as she sensed the threatening aura he exuded. The yuppie sashayed toward her again. Just as Fang Dan reacted, she received a violent blow to her stomach. It felt as if she was rammed by a car. The impact threw her backward by 4 to 5 meters, and she landed heavily on the ground. The man did not follow up with an attack even after a few seconds had passed. Fang Dan was also unable to sit up. She felt as if she might have a hernia. She tried to open her mouth, but it was as if something in her abdominal cavity had been damaged, so she couldn't even make a sound. Huh? I didn't expect that you really didn't develop any physical enhancements. The yuppie seemed genuinely a little surprised. Following which, he shrugged, showing his slight boredom. This is too easy. How pointless. Should I let you live? He circled Fang Dan twice as she laid on the ground like a dead fish. Nay. You are too dirty. I will get dirty if I carry you back. He would kill someone for that reason. Fang Dan winced with a contorted expression. She wanted to move badly. She wanted to run away, but her body was just like a rag. She couldn't even muster a bit of energy. The yuppie hummed an unknown tune and kicked Fang Dan's stomach violently without warning. Fang Dan, who initially thought that she couldn't make another sound, let out a soft groan. Since you are going to die, you can be the guinea pig for me to try out my ability. The yuppie's face suddenly lit up with excitement and anticipation under the darkness. He nudged Fang Dan's head with the tip of his foot and saw that her eyes were opened and that they were still moving. With that, he chuckled, good. As long as you can hear me. God is really unfair. There are people like you who don't even have the basic physical enhancements. Then, there is me. I just gained a new ability yesterday. The yuppie straightened up his vest and stuffed his hands in his pockets. Activate third-rate author, he said with a lowered voice. The yuppie's new ability, third-rate author. Introduction: to gain readers, one story must at least have a consistent logic. This is the fundamental standard that every third-rate author should have for themselves, unlike N.Heller, one who doesn't have a bottom line. Using the target as your protagonist, make up a short story about him or her. If the story follows a proper logic and is accepted by the people involved, the target will end up like the protagonist at the end of the story. Let me try this. The yuppie half closed his eyes as he stared at the woman at his feet, who had curled up on the ground. After you graduated from college, you met a handsome, young superior at your workplace. That's me. After both of you dated for some time, you found out that he actually had another girlfriend overseas. You felt that you were cheated, so you resigned from your job in a rage and hid yourself. However, you did not expect that the girlfriend was just a woman that his family chose, and he still loves you deeply. He found you and cleared up the misunderstanding. Thus, both of you fell in love again. Even though it was nearly impossible that such a rubbish, cliché story would happen in real life, tears suddenly welled up in Fang Dan's eyes. She opened her mouth and muttered in wretched happiness, I know our relationship must be real. The yuppie was stunned for a moment and stared at Fang Dan. Shortly after, he laughed out loudly, ha ha. This is fun. This is fun. He waved his hand and decided to change the direction of the story. Fang Dan's expression reverted back to normal. She felt her ears turning red and then her entire face. She was not embarrassed, but rather she was extremely angry. Just kill me, don't toy with my emotions. Fang Dan said in a coarse voice. The yuppie ignored her and continued. You were finally taking the last step toward marriage with the boyfriend you have loved for 7 years. Your new house was ready, and you were preparing for the wedding. You felt very blessed. After all, you have gone through a lot together with him, and now, what you longed for was just within your reach. Fang Dan's anger dissipated. She looked at the yuppie with an indescribable expression. The latter was thoroughly enjoying himself, entertained by his new ability. He merely glanced once at her and did not stop. But at that moment, your boyfriend told you that he fell in love with another woman. He begged you to let him go. For a long time, you tried to make him stay. You pestered him, you begged him, and you even threatened to kill yourself. Despite whatever methods you used, he still left you for another woman. But then, you realized that you were pregnant. You hesitated for a long time, but you decided to keep the child. The child was innocent after all. And if you thought about it carefully, the child's father couldn't do anything about it. It wasn't his fault for falling in love with another woman. Who could control love? You kept the child for 9 months and even engaged a great gynecologist. But in the end, the yuppie edged toward Fang Dan, and his voice grew cold. Your child was stillborn. You held your child and commit suicide by jumping off a building. Everything fell silent. The man and woman looking at each other did not say a word. They could only hear the howling night wind sweeping up the yellow clouds of sand. The more detailed the story was, the more powerful its effect. The yuppie watched the expressionless face of the woman in front of him, his smile grew wider. All of a sudden, just like a magic trick, the yuppie's body was flung up into the air. Splat! He fell to the ground, sprawled out in an odd position like a splattered watermelon. His arms and legs were contorted, and blood slowly seeped out from the side of his mouth. Fang Dan struggled for a while and managed to stand up. Their roles had been reversed. She narrowed her eyes and looked at the yuppie. He was in a terrible condition, just like he fell off a building. You really don't understand women, she whispered. Why this shouldn't happen. The yuppie coughed and spat out a mouthful of blood. That sort of woman should exist in reality, right? Fang Dan smiled coldly, she seemed to have understood his thoughts. Idiot. Her brow furrowed and she looked disgusted. The first half of the story did really happen to me. The yuppie's eyes widened. After my boyfriend cheated on me, I found out that I was pregnant. Do you know what I did? When I was 3 months pregnant, I chose an illegal abortion clinic. I got an abortion and placed the dead fetus into a box. Then, I sent that box to them as their wedding gift. Of course, I was mentally unstable then. After that, I went to visit a psychiatrist. The yuppie's arms trembled, he was unable to speak. I really hate conceited men. Fang Dan followed what the yuppie did and nudged the man's head with the tip of her foot. From your current condition, your ability can backfire on you, right? When a storyline is not logical and doesn't fit the target, you will end up like the protagonist instead. This is indeed a third-rate ability. The man on the ground could no longer hear her. A puddle of blood slowly extended outward from his motionless body. The author of this web novel, by the way. Chapter 65, I'm sorry for having a useless ability. What the hell? Ah! A black shadow circled the executive's building, it disappeared in a second, leaving a yellow trail of dust. This was followed tightly by 2 other figures, one who was visibly smaller. After a few seconds, the 3 shadows reenacted the same scenario, going around the building once again. Enough of your bullsh*. Stop and let me bite you to death right now, an angry soprano voice rang behind Lin Sanjiu. It was the brown rabbit who was almost half soaring in the sky because of its speed. You must be joking. Ah! Didn't they say there were 5 executives? How can a rabbit be an executive? Ah! If there was a vacancy, why didn't you people in Oasis inform me? There was no way Lin Sanjia would stop, though she knew her protests did nothing but made the brown rabbit angrier. Lin Sanjiu did not dare to run elsewhere with these two executives chasing her, as she was afraid that she might accidentally lead them to her companions and implicate them. Without a choice, she could only run in circles around the executives' building. The three people have already run for who knows how many rounds. Gah, the OL muttered as she paused and turned in the other direction, deciding to catch Lin Sanjiu by running in the opposite direction. When the brown rabbit saw her moving, he suddenly grew impatient and shouted at the OL, F***ck, you're doing that again. Before he finished his sentence, a person jumped over his body while he was in a daze. Lin Sanjiu landed behind the rabbit, and she continued forward without stopping. Once again, all of them were running in the same direction but with a slight change in position. By then, Lin Sanjiu was already very familiar with the whole shenanigan. Apparently, she had jumped over the rabbit a couple of times over the past few rounds. The brown rabbit's black eyes were almost turning red with fury. He screamed, "Stop changing directions. She just jumped over my head again. Curses." The OL's spectacles were tinted with a cold light in the dark. "It's all because you are so small, and you can't block her. You're useless," she said ruthlessly. "I'll bite you to death." The brown rabbit's eyes had already turned into two red inverted triangles. The OL ignored him. Even though she tried to run faster, there was no sign that they were closing the distance between themselves and Lin Sanjiu. Sprinting was all down to one's physical capabilities. Despite normal physical enhancement and Lin Sanjiu's overall physical enhancement both being passive abilities, they were of a different class, just like a burger set compared to a deluxe family Christmas meal. Other than the two people chasing her, most of the other post-humans would develop the normal burger set. Seeing the woman in front of him running away with ease, the brown rabbit could not tolerate it any longer. Its forepaws stopped, and it yelled out dispiritedly, "Startled monkeys, fleeing hares. 1. What a cultured rabbit." Before that thought fully popped up in Lin Sanjiu's mind, a turf of brown ball suddenly shot toward her back, like a projectile from a rocket launcher, and hit her. The forward inertia combined with the rabbit's natural strength knocked Lin Sanjiu, who was still sprinting, to the ground. The OL chased up to them within a few seconds and blocked Lin Sanjiu's path. Right now, it looked like it wasn't feasible for her to just stand up and leap over the rabbit. Lin Sanjiu stood up and dusted herself. "You're quite chubby," she complimented, looking at the brown rabbit. "I'm going to kill you." As the rabbit screeched, Lin Sanjiu didn't have an easy time evading the raining attacks from the rabbit. Due to the reflection on the OL's spectacles, it was difficult to see what her expression was. Her outstretched arms were quickly turning a glowing red. The heat which radiated from her arms started distorting the surrounding air. Lin Sanjiu's expression turned stiff. She knew that she would turn into a burning corpse if she touched those arms. However, the process was not over. A red glow with a tinge of white spread from the OL's shoulders to her chest and waist. Soon, the entire top half of her body became white. When a draft of wind blew over her body, even the sand carried by the wind burst into flames, falling to the ground like tiny comets, leaving a few burnt marks on the ground. A scorching embrace. Introduction: the user's upper body can reach an intimidating temperature of 260 degrees Celsius. This temperature is enough for the combustion of almost all material. For the exact list of materials, please check the common melting points of the various elements. Though the weakness of the ability was clearly the user's legs, Lin Sanjiu could not get close to her opponent's lower body at the moment. This was because the OL was much shorter than her. She guessed that the OL was about only 1.52 m. This isn't fair. Being unable to do much, she turned and continued to run. This time she couldn't be bothered if she might meet another of her companions. After all, the combat noises and explosions at the various corners of Oasis had already stopped. Even though she did not know what the outcome of the battles was, she could at least cause some confusion if things weren't looking good. No matter what, My potential growth value is very high. Why do both of you have such killer moves and I have nothing? Lin Sanjia grumbled softly, and naturally, no one replied. Before she could run far, the brown rabbit, whose speed increased incredibly after yelling out startled monkeys, fleeing hares, quickly caught up to her. Using the same tactic, he and the OL cornered her again. Without saying a word, the OL leaped and headed toward Lin Sanjiu. Lin Sanjiu did not dare to even let the woman get close to her. She immediately shrunk backward and dodged her. At the same time, she heard the rabbit shouting, "Wily hares, 3 burrows too." Before Lin Sanjiu could react, she felt 2 rabbit feet land on her shoulders. It felt as if she was hit by a blast wave. In the next second, a fountain of blood and flesh spurted out from the hole in her shoulder, dyeing the floor red. "If I use this ability, I can create burrows in your body," the brown rabbit laughed as it prepared to pounce on her again. Lin Sanjiu looked down at her wound and slowly lifted her head. Somehow, the expression on her face made the rabbit trembled for a second. Lin Sanjiu swung her left hand as if she didn't feel any pain. She held a long knife horizontally in her hand. Then, she bent over and thrust her knife toward the rabbit like a hungry wolf. The brown rabbit was shocked. He rolled aside and flipped his long ears to one side. Thus, barely dodging the blade that just scraped the tip of his head. After she missed her target, Lin Sanjiu did not immediately jump up and chase after the rabbit. Instead, she let herself fall to the ground. She did not even turn back to look but threw out a card from her hand toward her back. Right behind Lin Sanjiu was the OL, who was trying to follow up with an attack. When the OL noticed the card, it was too late for her to defend herself. The card was reaching her knee. Suddenly, the card changed into a long nail which pierced through the OL's knee. The woman howled. Her body swayed before she fell to the ground. The brilliant glow on her upper body immediately vanished. Marcy's nails. This is one of Marcy's fresh nail. Even though it still possesses the laundry bar soap will turn dirty itself effect, it can only last independently for 10 minutes away from the owner's body. Without her abilities, the OL was just a struggling piece of flesh. Lin Sanjiu knocked her unconscious with just 2 punches. The entire series of events only lasted for 5 seconds. The brown rabbit watched blankly the entire time, unable to react. Even when his opponent raised her knife, her target was the OL all along. He could tell that she had never received any sort of combat training, yet her movements were very accurate. It was as if she had eyes at the back of her head. Before his chain of thoughts ended, the rabbit found that he was looking down from a high viewpoint. This was followed by a shot of pain from his ears. He knew that he was being lifted. Braise or barbecue? Lin Sanjiu grinned coldly as she held the rabbit by his ears. The brown rabbit trembled. As he was in mid-air, his tiny rabbit feet could not reach Lin Sanjiu. Even if he had that wily hare's 3 burrows ability, it was useless if he could not touch her. He knew that he was at a great disadvantage, so he decided to use his last resort. The face in front of Lin Sanjiu was clearly a rabbit covered in soft fur, yet she could almost tell that he was sneering. The brown rabbit opened its mouth and muttered, "All the carrots are mine. All the carrots are mine." Introduction: the user will steal the strongest combat type ability that his opponent possesses and be able to use it exclusively for 5 minutes. After 5 minutes, "All the carrots are mine" will enter a cooldown state. During the cooldown period, the user cannot use any idioms with the word hare. Ha ha ha. How stupid. Your most powerful combat skill is with me now, the brown rabbit immediately mocked when he felt a familiar warmth flowing in his body. Let me see, huh? What's this? The rabbit looked at his paw and saw a diary card. Without even testing it out, he knew it was useless. Lin Sanjiu gazed back at him expressionlessly. The brown rabbit didn't know why, but he felt a little nervous suddenly. Wait. Please wait, a police baton. The rabbit gripped the police baton with its paw. Bzzzt, the police baton made a sound and ran out of batteries. And this. This nail. This was what you used just now. The card with Marcy's nail suddenly turned to smoke with a PSSH. It had reached the 10 minutes limit. Had enough fun. Lin Sangio stared at the rabbit grimly. The brown rabbit finally broke down. How is this possible? How can this be your primary combat skills? How were you able to survive till today? I don't believe this. You must have some hidden secret ability. The corner of Lin Sangio's mouth curled. I only have a single active skill, and it is that useless. Sorry. But I haven't eaten barbecued meat for a long time, so I am more inclined toward that. What about you? If rabbits had tear ducts, the rabbit would have been crying right now. Forget it, just let him go, a familiar voice came from behind them. There were two people standing behind her. The person who just spoke was Griselda, and Su Xiaoyang was standing behind her. Are you also here to fight? Lin Sangio continued holding the rabbit as she asked emotionlessly. The cool-down period for her Pygmalion choker was already over, and she still haven't used it. She could threaten the rabbit in her hand to describe an ability for her. She had a chance. Surprisingly, Su Xiaoyang shook her head. No, I am not here to fight with you. I know that you are not a traitor. The matter with the Duoluazongs was not you or your friend's fault. I just have a request that I hope you can accept. For a moment, nobody spoke. They could only hear the never-ending howls of the wind. The glow from the tiny little comets left behind by the OL lit the faces of the few people. I'll hear you out. Chapter 66, You're an idiot. Marcy could see a small hill-shaped figure moving toward her in the dark. She immediately paused as she observed it cautiously. It was slowly edging forward. The figure was very large, but it was extremely slow. Marcy placed her medical kit down and crossed her arms. After she waited for some time, the large shadow finally got closer and revealed its true form. When Marcy got a clear view of what it was, she raised one of her brows. What are you doing? The person that approached her was actually Hu Chenze. He was pulling on a rope, God knows how he got it, propped on his shoulder, and an unconscious Hai Tianqing was secured on the other end of the rope. He struggled with each step as he continued dragging that man behind him. The scene was like a chick trying to drag a camel. Hu Chenze was exhausted. He panted heavily, and he could almost feel his eyes popping out. Huffa, help me. When he looked up, he was instead astounded. Marcy, how did you end up like this? There wasn't a single part of her body that was unhurt, it was either bandaged or covered with ointment. He almost couldn't tell what her original skin color was. Marcy sighed in resignation. I received too many cuts just now, so I went to the infirmary to treat my wounds first. I also took some items that I think will be useful. Don't worry, they're all superficial wounds, but I killed Chen Jinfeng. But what are you doing, dragging your opponent around like that? Hu Chenze spotted the medical kit and immediately lay on the ground with a plop. He waved his arms and said, Tend to his wounds first, he's on our side, I'll tell you more details later. Let me catch my breath. Since he said that, Marcy took out a bottle of rubbing alcohol and a set of thread and needle. She dealt with Hai Tianqing's wounds quickly and fed him some antibiotics. After all that, she wiped her hands with a cotton cloth and mumbled self-deprecatingly, Since I came to Oasis, I'm almost becoming a doctor. All right, he can sleep here. Whether he survives is up to him. Anyway, with Hai Tianqing's body frame, it was difficult to move him anywhere else, so Hu Chenze nodded. Just then, they heard a cough not far from them and a quiet voice, Is that you, Marcy? Both of them looked up and saw a person stumbling toward them. It was Fang Dan. Fang Dan's body was covered with large patches of bruises. She didn't have many open wounds, but she looked rather sickly. Great, I finally found you both. Before she could finish her sentence, she nearly fell to the ground. Hu Chunzhe realized and quickly helped her up while Marcy immediately checked Fang Dan's injuries. You have at least 3 broken ribs. How can you still move around? It's too dangerous. What about your opponent? Marcy exclaimed. Fang Dan managed a weak but proud smile. Since I'm alive, he's definitely dead. With that, she turned and spotted Hai Tianqing and was shocked. Ah! But why? After Hu Chunzhe explained the situation hurriedly, Fang Dan looked at him skeptically but did not say anything else. Marcy provided Fang Dan some first aid treatment. Seeing that Fang Dan should not move in her current condition, Hu Chunzhe and Marcy helped her over and let her rest beside Hai Tianqing. We'll go and see how Xiaoju is and return shortly. Even though there is no one outside now, you better hide beside Executive Hai for now, Marcy said softly. Fang Dan nodded and leaned on one of Hai Tianqing's arm, which was almost as thick as the trunk of a small tree. She gradually relaxed. After seeing Fang Dan closing her eyes, Marcy and Hu Chunzhe sped for the executive's building without delay. Who'd have guessed? I didn't know Fang Dan was so powerful. I wonder what's her ability, Hu Chunzhe commented between breaths as he tried to keep up with Marcy's speed. Marcy paused for a second and turned to look at him curiously. I don't know. Haven't you two been here in Oasis for a long time? I thought you knew. Hu Chunzhe didn't know how to respond, but he did not take it to heart. He thought to himself that when Fang Dan was feeling better, they still had plenty of chance to ask her. After running at that speed for 1 minute, they could see the executive's building just ahead. By then, the dust that they had stirred from the ground had attracted the attention of the people standing at the executive's building. 1, 2, 3. That's weird. Why are there 3 people standing in front of Xiaoju? There is also something in Xiaoju's hand. Marcy crooked her head, puzzled. What the hell is she holding anyway? Marcy could see that Lin Sanjiu was facing the 3 people alone, but Lin Sanjiu did not look nervous. Lin Sanjiu saw Marcy and even waved at her, shouting, Marcy, Hu Chunzhe, come here. With a trail of dust behind her, Marcy stopped beside Lin Sanjiu, unable to comprehend the current situation. She looked at the 3 people. There was a girl with braids and an attractive woman, and she remembered that she had seen them once. The last person was a middle-aged woman with cropped hair and was wearing a white coat. Marcy had no idea who that woman was and realized that she had never seen her before. After some considerations, Marcy asked the question that she was most concerned about, where did you catch that rabbit? Can we eat it? She couldn't be blamed for that since it was a question prompted by the fact that she had not eaten fresh meat in 28 months. I'm not your goddamn food. Ushttyfer, even though his ears were still firmly in Lin Sanjiu's grip, the brown rabbit regained its former vulgar tone after he was reassured by the presence of his allies, Su Xiaoyang's group. Don't stare at me. Get away from me. What's the matter? Marcy asked, flabbergasted. This was also the first time Marcy had seen a talking rabbit. As if she suddenly remembered the others, she added, who are they? While they were talking, Hu Chunzhe ran toward them, breathlessly. Lin Sanjiu did not answer Marcy but instead asked in a serious tone, is everyone all right? What happened to the other 3 executives? The people in Su Xiaoyang's group immediately showed interest when they heard her question. Other than Hai Tianqing, the other 2 are dead. Marcy tilted her chin upward as she tossed a sideward glance the 3 people, whose purpose were unknown to her. After seeing their expressions changed, she continued softly, Fang Dan's injuries are quite serious. She is resting with Hai Tianqing now. When Hu Chunzhe noticed Lin Sanjiu's slightly perturbed expression, and he quickly interjected, I'll explain it to you later. What about you, Xiaoju? Aren't there 2 more executives? Well, one of them is here. Lin Sanjiu lifted up her arm and shook the rabbit. Hey, say hello. The rabbit scowled and kept quiet. So the rumored Mr. Rabbit executive is really a rabbit? Hu Chunzhe said in shock. As for the other executive, she is unconscious. Lin Sanjiu shrugged as the two people looked at her with astonishment. Before Marcy and Hu Chunzhe could respond, Su Xiaoyang gasped in disbelief, I don't understand how you all could defeat the executives. With the few of you, and some of you still haven't developed physical enhancements. That's right, as if Su Xiaoyang's comment finally reminded Lin Sanjiu about their purpose of gathering, she jutting her chin at Su Xiaoyang and said, Team leader Su said that she has a request. Since all of you are here, let's hear her out. When Su Xiaoyang heard her, she lowered her eyelids, showing a dispirited expression. At that moment, she did not look like a child at all. She looked at the middle-aged woman beside her for a moment and tugged the corner of the woman's shirt. She couldn't help sighing as she said, I hope you won't hurt my mom. Your mom? Su Xiaoyang nodded as her French braid slid to the side of her cheeks, I am Professor Bai's daughter. All of them immediately looked at the middle-aged woman. Su Xiaoyang's voice was now so soft that it was barely audible, my mom is also one of the people who ate the medicine which provides heat resistance adaptation. She has zero potential growth value, so she doesn't have any other abilities. But if all of you intend to hurt her, even if I'll die, I'll. So, she is Professor Bai. Lin Sanjiu interrupted just as Su Xiaoyang was about to show her resolve, actually, we had no idea who Professor Bai is. If you didn't say that just now, I would have just let her go. Su Xiaoyang lifted her head, as regret filled her face. Since we know this now, I am not going to just let her leave like this. At least, she needs to explain everything. Lin Sanjiu nodded at Su Xiaoyang slightly apologetically, as she turned to ask, why are you rearing duoluazongs here? Su Xiaoyang was startled by the question and wanted to say something, however, Professor Bai patted her daughter's shoulder, indicating that she shouldn't. The rabbit in Lin Sanjiu's hand froze for a moment before he sneered, what rubbish are you talking about? When I chose this path, I knew I'd be alone, the middle-aged woman interrupted the rabbit. The brown rabbit could only look at her in a daze. Professor Bai cast her eyes at the dormitories and looked at them for a moment before she continued, yesterday, it was the first time that some of the kids around Xiaoyang's age entered the greenhouse. Lin Sanjiu was unsure what the woman meant. They were starting on biology, so the teachers brought them to the greenhouse to plant some carrots. Tomorrow, next week after they wait for a while, they'll see the carrots grow just like these children. Professor Bai smiled faintly as a few wrinkles appeared at the side of her mouth. Then, she turned to look around. There are currently 1,600 people living in those 5 buildings. There are men and women, most of them are young and vibrant. They still have many years ahead of them, and Oasis is a great model to start rebuilding a civilization again. These people are the future hope for mankind. Professor Bai inhaled deeply, and a gentle smile appeared on her face. To protect this hope, for mankind's survival, I will continue down this dark path. I won't complain. Hu Chunzhe was stunned, he looked to his companions and nodded. She is saying all these from the bottom of her heart, he concluded quietly. What does this have to do with the duoluazongs? Professor Bai looked at them each. What if I tell you that Oasis could reach such a scale all because of the duoluazongs? Lin Sanjiu's group and that one rabbit were shocked and dumbfounded. Why would people evolve? This has bothered me for a long time. Does this mean that post-humans are better than normal people? Does it mean they deserve to survive? But that shouldn't be the case. Post-humans only make up a very small population. The people who truly need to live and survive are those 1,600 normal people. Whatever I'm doing is just to sacrifice a few lives to save the majority. Su Xiaoyang pursed her lips tightly and lowered her head. I'm quite ashamed to say this, but most of the technology used to save the people here in Oasis wasn't my creation. A duoluazhong shared with me the technology to produce heat-resistant crops. he gave me the medicine for the heat resistance adaptation and also the methods to get water, and what the Duoluazhong and his companions needed were just a few natural post-humans. Apparently, Duoluazhongs need to evolve as well. And they do this by consuming post-humans, the woman continued in a mild tone, her gentle smile showed some resignation. However, there was a glint of insanity in her eyes which was getting obvious by the minute. After some time, someone finally spoke. You mean you used Oasis's living conditions as bait to attract natural post-humans? Then, you treated them like what you did to us? You sent them to the Duoluazongs. You sent them to their deaths. Lin Sanjiu sounded crestfallen as she said this. The details were always arranged by Executive Chen. So, all of you actually came back from one of those missions. Professor Bai nodded before she said sincerely, on behalf of all the members of Oasis, I am truly grateful for each and every posthuman's sacrifice. Lin Sanjiu had been looking downwards all this time. Suddenly, she erupted, you idiotic woman. She clenched her fist and went in for a punch. At the same time, Fang Dan, who had been lying beside Hai Tianqing, suddenly moved. She seemed to have heard a noise, so she slowly opened her eyes. Under the night sky, she saw a person walking toward her. It's you. I knew you'd be all right. Is everything going well? She asked with a smile on her face. Chapter 67, Good evening. Dear members. Before Lin Sanjiu's fist reached Professor Bai, one of Griselda's arms rapidly swelled up. Without saying a word, Griselda stepped forward and swept her arm toward Lin Sanjiu. Lin Sanjiu flipped backward and evaded that attack. She immediately stared back at Griselda coldly. The brown rabbit in her hands was almost driven mad with anger. If you want to die, don't bring me with you. Let me down. Lin Sanjiu ignored him. Her heaving chest and her popped veins were more than enough proof that she was incensed. Su Xiaoyang's expression was not any better. I've already warned you. If you dare to hurt my mom, I won't hold back. Are you crazy? Lin Sanjiu did not turn to look at Su Xiaoyang. Who knows how many post-humans you've killed? Just for them to live another 14 months. Lin Sanjiu hollered as she continued staring at Professor Bai. What do you mean? Professor Bai looked back at Lin Sanjiu, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. It was as if she was looking at a kid throwing a tantrum. I've already told you. I want to help these people so that they can repopulate the world and rebuild civilization. My mom might let you down, but she did this for the greater good, Su Xiaoyang retorted furiously. Her small face was flushed with anger when she saw how rude Lin Sanjiu was to her mom. Lin Sanjiu paused for a moment as if she suddenly realized something. She instantly exchanged glances with Marcy, and they became visibly appalled. If she thought about it carefully, she had never heard anyone mention it before during their time in Oasis. She looked at Hu Chunzai's perplexed face. Lin Sanjiu lifted the rabbit in her hand and asked hoarsely, Hu Chunzai, Rabbit, I have a question for you both. Do you know anything about the random die and the next world? There was pure silence for a few seconds. Lin Sanjiu already knew their answers from the looks on their faces, even without them replying. Marcy covered her face as she gave a long sigh. Noticing the unusual reaction of the two women, Hu Chunzai felt anxious as he sensed that there was something wrong. What do you mean by the next world? Please explain it clearly to us. Professor Bai also raised her eyebrows slightly. Oh God! Lin Sanjiu felt a bitter taste in her mouth. She really didn't know how to put it in words. Post-humans can only stay in a single world for 14 months. After 14 months, you will be randomly sent to another world. It will still be an apocalyptic world and it will only be worse. All the other people, other than Marcy, gave her a "you're crazy" look. She's telling the truth, Marcy said solemnly as she stepped forward. I came from another world. In my original world, a deadly virus was accidentally released from a lab. As it was airborne, about 95% of the human population was wiped out before the experts developed an antiviral serum. A crack finally appeared on Professor Bai's calm and tranquil face. She gasped at Marcy and mumbled, I don't understand, how is this possible? Hu Chenzhe sat down on the ground with a thud and smiled bitterly as he muttered to him, she's telling the truth. If I am not wrong, the Duoluaz Hong that helped you must be from another world. Lin Sanjiu said as she shook her head. If he isn't from another world, how do you explain why he had those technologies? Whatever he gave you would have brought about a technological revolution. Didn't you ever suspect anything? Professor Bai was in a daze, her face was turning pale as she seemed to have realized something. Wait. You mean? Lin Sanjiu sighed. That's right, Professor Bai. Since you gave those 1,600 normal people medicine which caused them to evolve and gain the heat resistance adaptation, they have no choice but to go to another world. When I heard Chen Jinfeng talking about Oasis's grand mission, I was simply unconvinced. Now that I think about it, that's because all these people you've gathered here will soon go off to different worlds. They'll all disappear from this place, even you. Who will remain to populate this world? To rebuild civilization. Once these weak people face a new environment, I can guarantee they'll die in a more painful manner than being here. Do you know why? Based on the survival difficulty, our world is merely a D-level world. It's considerably easy to survive here compared to the other worlds. You've been wrong from the start. Post-humans are not just a fraction of the human population, they're the last hope for mankind. And how many of these people have you sent out to die? Lin Sanjiu wanted to continue, but Marcy patted her shoulder gently. Xiaoju. Only at that moment did she realize that Professor Bai was now sitting on the ground with an ashen face, scared out of her wits due to the revelation. Her lips were trembling, and tears were pouring from the corners of her eyes. Su Xiaoyang was so affected by this that she hugged her mother and repeated mum over and over again, unable to offer any word of comfort. How could this be? He'd never mention anything like that to me. I always thought that I was doing the right thing. Even though Professor Bai knew her methods might be unpleasant, she had always been wholly committed to her mission. Now that she suddenly knew the truth, now that the bubble had burst, she really could not take the blow. The brown rabbit also gave a look of disbelief, let alone Professor Bai. Lin Sanjiu held her words back for a while. She finally spoke after she saw the mother and daughter duo stuck in such a shell-shock stage. Professor Bai, I know that you must be feeling all sorts of emotions right now, but you have to answer my question. Where can we find that Duoluaz Hong you've been working with? Professor Bai continued to sit in a daze as if she didn't hear what Lin Sanjiu said. She fixed her gaze at the dormitories without saying a word. Just when Lin Sanjiu was about to question the woman again, she felt something hot on her thigh. It seemed to be from her pants pocket. She held the rabbit with her other hand and checked her pocket. She pulled out a piece of paper, the visa that she had taken from Voli. However, it looked nothing like before. All the information had been crossed out with a long dark line. The paper was turning so hot that it was nearly impossible for her to continue holding onto it. A red line of words appeared on the bottom of the paper. The holder of this visa has died. This visa is no longer valid. Lin Sanjiu's heart skipped a beat. She turned to look at Marcy instinctively. 12 is dead. Will Marcy disappear? Does this mean that Luther is dead too? Unexpectedly, nothing happened to Marcy. She was fine in general. Marcy crooked her head at Lin Sanjiu, looking puzzled. What's wrong? Is this your delayed reaction? What will happen to you if 12 dies? Lin Sanjiu managed to force those words out of her mouth. She'd never felt so afraid before. Not even that time when she was almost eaten by Ren Nan. I'll definitely disappear immediately. My existence is dependent on Luther. If his physical body dies, there is no way I can survive. Marcy hesitated for a moment as the wind blew her red hair into her face. What did you suddenly bring this up? Lin Sanjiu continued staring for some time at Marcy nervously, to the extent the Marcy started feeling uneasy. Something suddenly dawned on her, and she slapped her own thigh saying, "I've been deceived." Su Xiaoyang looked up with her tear-filled eyes while Hu Chenzhe stood up and walked closer to Lin Sanjiu, worriedly. This visa was issued to someone else. Why did Voli lie to me? Lin Sanjiu said furiously, "I'll deal with him when I get back." Other than Marcy and herself, this was the first time the others have heard of that sort of visa and were all puzzled. After thinking about it for a while, Lin Sanjiu knew that the matter with Voli could be dealt with later. Instead, the bigger problem was the Duoluazhong that Professor Bai mentioned. Suddenly, they heard a resounding click from the speakers of the executive's building. It was the sound of the microphone being switched on. All of them were stunned as they looked up. "Good evening. Dear members of Oasis." It was the same male voice which had been making the announcements the entire day. It seemed like it was a new announcement. The voice traveled through Oasis, as the speakers in all the factory compound rang with his voice. They could instantly hear the commotion from the dormitories. "Hey, what do you all still have to say at this point?" Lin Sanjiu scratched her head and asked impatiently. "You better tell me, where is that Duoluazhong? All humans, please stay put. I am not referring to you." That sentence was like a stop button. Everyone froze when they heard that. They all looked up at the speaker, with gaping mouths as they stood still. "Now, I am going to give you the latest update. All the 5 executives have already been defeated. Professor Bai has also found out about the truth regarding this world and understand that the possibility of rebuilding human civilization is but a delusion. If we don't do anything, we will not be able to keep our farm. Therefore, with a heavy heart, I must say, please ignore all previous rules. Go out there or enjoy the massacre." Once the announcement ended, numerous Duoluazhong flew out from the top floors of the factory buildings. Their numbers quickly filled the skies. They spread their black carapace-like wings, swung their mouthparts and polluted the air with their terrible stench. "Please be careful. To prevent the wastage of resources, please do not create large wounds on those humans. The corpses will be collected later." Even though they knew that the Duoluazhong that misled Professor Bai was upstairs, Lin Sanjiu and the others could not do much. At that moment, the number of Duoluazhongs that flew down from the executive's building was twice that of the other buildings. Furthermore, each of those Duoluazhongs was staring at them. Chapter 68, Death of the Utmost Consular Officer. The entire sky was now hidden from view. They could hear the cacophony of their own heavy breaths and their footsteps as they ran as fast as they could between the building with Lin Sanjiu leading the way. Their goal was to reach the vehicles. Once they get their vehicles, they could pick up Fang Dan and Hai Tianqing and escape from Oasis. From the ground to the sky, the current scenario could be split into 3 layers. The top layer was made of many Duoluazhongs. They were flying above Lin Sanjiu's group and following them, but they were unable to swoop down and attack the people below as there was a gigantic silver net between them and the humans below. If they slowed down to look at that net carefully, they would realize that it was made of random paraphernalia, a broken brick, a torn insulation blanket, a ladle from the canteen, a metal grill. They were all junk items, but they all had a silver sheen like the well-polished edge of a katana. The brown rabbit held onto Lin Sanjiu's combat pants with 2 paws. His furball-like body bounced in tandem with Lin Sanjiu's pace. He looked up at the gigantic net above them and yelled out, "It's almost ready." Without even looking up, Lin Sanjiu snapped her fingers. The items which made up the silver net immediately dispersed. They shot upward toward the Duoluazhongs, each leaving a silver trail like those of a meteor streak. The Duoluazhongs did not even bat an eye. Their excited screeches became even sharper. They were not afraid of that rubbish. Without the net, it was even easier for all of them. That common thinking was disproved in half a second. A piece of rag with the hardness of a diamond, rotating at a very high speed, sliced off one of the wings which belonged to a Duoluazhong. In shock, it let out a screech before it crashed downward as it lost control. It fell toward a pile of rubbish. Its body was instantaneously shredded into bits and explosion of blood and ground flesh erupted in mid-air. Fantastic! Do it again! While the brown rabbit cheered excitedly, the roof of several of the dormitories broke into pieces, almost 1,000 parts, consisting of bricks, tiles, and wood showed a familiar silver sheen and rapidly replaced the gaps in the net. Marcy was inspired by Chen Jinfeng's ability when she described this ability to Lin Sanjiu. After Lin Sanjiu's Pygmalion choker was activated, she could feel a slight warmth from under the bandages on her neck. Compared to Chen Jinfeng, who could only control a limited number of items simultaneously, Lin Sanjiu's extremely high potential growth value meant that she could control nearly 1,000 weaponized items at the same time. That also meant that the lethality of the ability in her hands was far beyond that of Chen Jinfeng. I didn't know you were that powerful. Su Xiaoyang was just behind Lin Sanjiu. The girl petite face was now pale, perhaps from all that running or even because she was scared by Lin Sanjiu. Griselda was running beside Su Xiaoyang, carrying Professor Bai on her back. Professor Bai was dumbfounded as she looked up at the sky. Lin Sanjiu sighed dejectedly. The disparity between feeling like a superhero for 5 minutes and a weak sh*t for the remaining 1,435 minutes within a 24-hour period was really too great. She couldn't help feeling that it was bad for her heart. As she thought about time, she suddenly asked, Hu Chenzhe, how many more minutes do I have? Marcy was carrying Hu Chenzhe on her back as his running speed was really behind everyone. His face was red and flustered as he replied, You have exactly 4 minutes. We are reaching soon, we can make it in time. They could indeed see the empty lot where the vehicles were right ahead. Without 12's key, they could retrieve 2 vehicles. Thankfully, Marcy's bus was large, so they probably had enough space for everyone. Once Lin Sanjiu reached her truck, she scanned her surroundings and saw something which stunned her for a moment. The few people running behind her also noticed what she saw. The back of her truck was opened, the door was slightly ajar. There were a few mineral water bottles on the ground and a packet of crushed instant noodle with a footprint on it. The packet of instant noodle was right in the middle of a puddle of fluid. Pitter-patter. Pitter-patter. Drops of blood trickling down from the small gap between the opened doors hit the plastic packaging of the instant noodle. Lin Sanjiu's eyes were glued on the gruesome state of Voli's corpse for a few seconds before she suddenly covered her mouth. Marcy quickly rushed beside her, and when she saw that sight, her expression changed immediately. It's 12. From the methods used, it was clear that the murderer was none other than 12. Multiple organs in the body have all been slit open. Lin Sanjiu knew that she didn't have time to waste, so she bore with the wave of nausea and pulled the body off the truck and indicated for Marcy to throw Hu Chenzhe's protest. After that, she heaved a sigh. The visa was issued to Voli, so the consular officer must be someone else. Even though she came to that conclusion, she knew that this was not the time to think about the matter regarding the consular officer. She only had 3 minutes and 20 seconds before her Pygmalion choker went into cool-down mode again. Seeing that everyone in both vehicles already settled down, Lin Sanjiu closed the door of her truck, pulled out her key and started the engine. She stepped on the accelerator and sped toward where Fang Dan was. She did not need to swerve to avoid the obstacles as everything in front of them were weaponized and added to the net, opening a clear path for the 2 vehicles. With the gigantic net she had set up, Fang Dan and Hai Tianqing should be safe for now. Before even half a minute passed, the brown rabbit which was on her shoulder suddenly bounced up. That's Hai Tianqing. I see Hai Tianqing. She could also see Hai Tianqing, with his hill-like physique, sitting up. Beside him, there was a woman lying on her side. Lin Sanjiu braked sharply, and the truck came to a screeching halt. The brown rabbit stumbled and crashed into the windscreen. That nearly made his nose crooked. He crawled up and cursed noisily. But when he turned to look at Lin Sanjiu, He noticed her sheet white face. "What wrong? Seen a ghost?" the brown rabbit whispered as he turned back to the front to look. That woman, the person who had been later identified as a traitor by the announcer Fang Dan, was leaning against Hai Tianking's arm. She laid motionless, with her eyes wide opened. A large patch of blood spread out from her stomach, and there was a black knife handle sticking out of the wound. As the knife was too deep in her body, Lin Sanjiu took a few seconds to recognize what the murder weapon was. Her hands and legs shivered as she opened the door and got off her truck. Subsequently, Marcy, Hu Chunzhe, and Su Xiaoyang also stepped out. They could hear the vague sounds of screaming humans on the verge of death coming from far corners of Oasis. They could also smell the stench in the air as the Duoluazongs flapped their wings. They could feel the sand in the wind. Then, almost as if emerging from a deadly silence, Lin Sanjia walked toward Fang Dan's body in a daze. "Don't come any nearer!" Hai Tianqing suddenly yelled out angrily. He looked as if he was about to stand up, but he didn't move. Lin Sanjia felt some sand stuck to her face as a gust of wind blew past. When she reached to dust her face, she realized that she had been crying. She wiped her face and eyed Hai Tianqing coldly. "Did you kill her?" Hu Chunzhe's voice was also trembling when he said, "Executive Hai, why did you? I thought we had already discussed." "I didn't kill her." Hai Tianqing pounded the ground with his fist. At the same time a nearby wall vibrated due to the tremor. "Brother Hu, quick! Come over here. You don't know, but the murderer is that woman." Hai Tianqing pointed at Lin Sanjia with his thick index finger. "At that time, I was only half conscious, so I didn't wake up." Fang Dan appeared to have seen someone she knew. "After that, I heard her calling that person Xiaoju." She continued with a question, asking, "Why isn't Marcy and Hu Chunzhe with you?" Then, I opened my eyes. Hai Tianqing inhaled sharply. He shot a look of fury at Lin Sanjiu. "I saw her. She was the person I saw. She stabbed Fang Dan even before I could say a word, but I fainted at that critical point." As if she was drenched by a bucket of icy water, Lin Sanjiu could not say a word as she gripped the sides of her combat pants tightly. Her shoulder trembled violently. Knowing the truth, Marcy also had a very grim expression on her face. They knew that the person that killed Fang Dan was 12. Why did 12 kill her? They had nothing against each other. Lin Sanjiu's voice was muffled. For the second time, she felt a heat radiating from her pocket. It was so hot that her skin started feeling painful, so she reached for the visa numbly. Another line of red words appeared at the bottom of the visa: "The consular officer of hyperthermal hell has died. All visa issued by the aforesaid person are now invalid." Lin Sanjiu and Marcy looked toward Hai Tianking's direction. At the same time, Hu Chunzhe was standing beside Hai Tianqing, explaining that Lin Sanjiu had been with them all this time and assured that there was no way that Lin Sanjiu could duplicate herself and kill Fang Dan. He even got the brown rabbit and Su Xiaoyang to be her witness. Hai Tianqing was still doubtful, but when he saw the item in Lin Sanjiu's hand he shouted out again, "No, it's really her. That woman looked for Fang Dan and asked for that visa or something." Fang Dan laughed and said, "You actually found out that I have this useless ability." Next, Fang Dan gave that woman that same paper. Once the woman received the paper, she killed Fang Dan. Hai Tianqing continued, "When she died, that woman suddenly cursed vulgarly and said, 'So it'll become invalid if she dies,' then she headed." Hai Tianqing finally realized the oddity of the entire situation. Huh? That woman was heading for the main entrance of Oasis. Yet, all of you came from there. He frowned, the opposite direction. After she composed herself, Lin Sanjiu said, "I have an enemy. He knows how to shapeshift." When she spoke, her words seemed agonizing to her. "Hu Chunzhe, can you carry Fang Dan and place her in the truck? We can't leave her here, she will be consumed by those Duoluazongs. We don't have much time now. Let's go." Before this, She had never placed such emphasis on those last two words. She still had 1 minute, 56 seconds before the cool-down period of her Pygmalion choker. Marcy did not move. Instead, she stopped Huchenze and passed him the bus key. "Marcy, what are you doing?" Lin Sangio turned to her side and asked, feeling very uneasy. After she said that, they heard a zzzt. Marcy's body suddenly began to fade like the image on an old television when the signal was bad. "I need to leave first, don't worry, I'll definitely make 12 pay for what he did," Marcy said gently while smiling. Chapter 69, Destroying Oasis in 30 Seconds. Before the climate changed, before the temperature was high enough to kill, I was just an average man with a normal family. I lived an ordinary life with my wife of almost 6 years and my pair of 3-year-old twin girls. We were happy. Even after the apocalypse, I still felt that I was extremely lucky. My wife and both daughters managed to develop the heat resistance adaptation ability. I was the only one who gained an active skill. Even though it was nothing incredible, I tried my best to protect my family. I managed to get food, water, and a shelter. I always had a muscular build so none of the Duoluazongs could get close enough to harm my precious daughters. But the gods suddenly withdrew their blessings one particular night. That day, we drove for a long time, so the engine overheated. We needed time for it to cool down and also we were running out of gas. I knew that there was a gas station just a couple of streets away, and there was even a small shop selling car accessories. Of course, I would never leave my wife and children in an unfamiliar place just like that. Before I parked the car at the gas station, I surveyed the place 3 times and checked very carefully. That place was safe, there were no Duoluazongs, there weren't even any other humans. I found a number of useful items we could use and even saw a few duck plus highs at the entrance of the shop. I was happy and quickly picked out 2 clean plus highs. My daughters used to insist on having their rubber ducks in the bathtub before they bathe. At that time, I thought it would be a great idea to give them these 2 duck plus highs since they could no longer bathe in a bathtub. While I carried cans of coolant and gas, reflective sheets, and 2 large duck plus highs, I had to crook my head to look at the road ahead. When I walked out of the gas station, I realized that there were 2 brown figures with carapace-like skin, standing on both sides of my car. I took at least a minute to recognize what they were. Perhaps, I had unintentionally made a sound, so the 2 figures straightened their backs and turned to look at me. I finally saw their human-like faces and their long mouth parts. My wife's blood was still dripping from the mouth part of the Duoluazhong nearer to me. I can still clearly remember the Duoluazhong standing beside my wife's gray, lifeless face. "Hey, are you full? Let's go. That person looks pretty strong," it said to the other Duoluazhong. "But I haven't finished drinking the blood of this young one. It's so fresh." My memory became a little hazy here. I vaguely remembered throwing down everything in my hands. I flew over, determined to save my daughter who might still be alive. "Ah! I know. Let's do this," the Duoluazhong replied quickly and swiftly stuck its mouthpart through the car's window and pulled it out again. 2 little corpses dangled from its long mouthpart, and they looked like my daughters. The Duoluazhong had used its mouthpart to pierce through both their heads, just like a kebab, and pulled their bodies out of the car. While I let out a heartbroken howl, they stretched out their wings. This made me realize how they could suddenly appear. After that, I never saw another winged Duoluazhong again. Who would have known that they were just around us, Hai Tianqing concluded as his eyes were plastered on the large number of Duoluazongs flying in the air and on the roofs of the buildings. He slowly stood up and said, "This is now my heaven. I will not leave unless I kill every one of them." Lin Sangio stood in front of her truck, listening quietly to his story. Professor Bai sighed softly, "It's all my fault. I led them here, so I inadvertently caused the death of your wife and children too." "Mom." Su Xiaoyang pled urgently, but Professor Bai suddenly smiled. In my whole life, this is the first time I realized how cowardly I am. Professor Bai said mildly, if I were killed by them, at least I wouldn't need to face my guilt for the rest of my life. But the only thing I am worried about is you. The tip of Su Xiaoyang's nose had turned red, she pursed her lip, unable to say a word. Hu Chunzhe glanced at them for a moment before he looked at Lin Sanjiu and asked, how are things? Can you still see her? I can still spot her from this distance, Lin Sanjiu replied while she tried to calm herself. Once she started running toward that direction, Marcy's body had already stabilized. At least she no longer looks blurry. Hu Chunzhe heaved a sigh of relief. Now that Marcy was not in any danger of disappearing, they should leave, but what should we do now? Hu Chunzhe watched Lin Sanjiu as he waited for a reply. He continued, are we really just going to leave them here? There was only 1 minute and 2 seconds left till the cool-down period of her Pygmalion choker. Lin Sanjiu laughed icily as she looked up at the sky. After she slaughtered a large group of duoluazongs, the duoluazongs stopped chasing after them in one huge pack. Instead, most of them stayed on the roofs or hid themselves, as if waiting quietly for the right time to strike. The duoluazongs without wings had already made their way to the basements and were now in the middle of their massacre. Just when Lin Sanjiu was about to announce that they were leaving, a few winged duoluazongs flew quickly in Marcy's direction. Lin Sanjiu's eyelid twitched as she quickly sent a segment of the net toward them. Those duoluazongs were torn apart in seconds. Miss Lin, shouldn't you be thinking of escaping now? A man's calm voice rang out from the speakers. Unfortunately, after we came to this bloody place, we became duoluazongs because we didn't have the heat resistance adaptation. But you shouldn't look down on us since we were once post-humans. I know that the more powerful an ability is, the greater the restrictions are. With that ability, you're probably running out of time, right? Isn't it better for you to think about how you should escape? Rather than think about others. He laughed. There were only 42 seconds left till the cool-down period of her Pygmalion choker. With an ice-cold expression, Lin Sanjiu turned to look at Hai Tianqing and Su Xiaoyang. Then, she said, if you really intend to stay behind, you have 5 seconds each to say what your abilities are. They both exchanged a glance and came to a decision immediately. Griselda is my ability, Su Xiaoyang explained first. Su Xiaoyang's ability, War/Doll. Description: the user has the ability to summon a humanoid combat doll. The user decides Griselda's features, gender, build, etc. Griselda's combat strength is determined by how satisfied it is with its own appearance. Without knowing the doll's preference, the user only has one chance to change the doll's appearance at each stage. Even though otakus covet this ability, only normal people can gain this ability. Current satisfaction level, 9%. How unlucky, Lin Sanjiu thought to herself as she briefly looked at Griselda's wavy hair and her devilishly beautiful looks before looking at Hai Tianqing. Jimming can also create obstacles for one's enemy. Hai Tianqing's ability, the glory of a personal trainer. Description: the effect of the ability lasts for 3 minutes. Hai Tianqing will become a superstar athlete with superior physique. The item that he chooses in his mind will possess the characteristics of a particular gym equipment. This can be used for obstructing the enemy and to help himself. The current usable gym equipment: dumbbells, treadmill, yoga mat. 34 seconds left till cooldown. Starting from now, both of you must listen to my instructions without questions. Understand? Lin Sanjiu shouted again, Hu Chunzhe, drive that bus out of here and keep Professor Bai and the rabbit hidden. Hu Chunzhe quickly left and went to start the engines. What are you planning? Su Xiaoyang asked her, a little puzzled. 30 seconds left till cooldown. Lin Sanjiu did not answer her. The items in mid-air wobbled a little. As if they had all suddenly lost their life force, they fell to the ground one after the other and reverted back to their normal state without that silver sheen. When the silver net fell, the duoluazongs began to stir. A few impatient ones started flying toward them as if to test the water. "Get Griselda to protect me," Lin Sanjia shouted as she set her eyes on the 7th floor of the executive's building, which was where the broadcasting room was located. "I'm going to disintegrate that. Get ready, Hai Tianqing." Even though she was more powerful than Chen Jinfeng due to her potential growth value, breaking down the entire floor of a building was still very taxing, even if she had already given up maintaining the protective silver net. She predicted that the duoluazongs would take the opportunity and attack them like ravenous beasts once the process started, and she was right. When the corner of the executive's building melted off like an ice cream cake, the duoluazongs who figured out her plan went ballistic. The duoluazongs gathered in the sky, covering it entirely, looming over them like dark gray clouds. Lin Sanjia did not even bat an eye as she stood at the top of her truck, focusing on the executive's building. Sweat began to appear on her forehead. 19 seconds until cooldown. Even though Griselda was very unsatisfied with her own appearance, her attacks were still very potent. At that moment, her entire body swelled up with muscles and sinews. A blow from her arms could smash a duoluazhong to bits. However, as she could not fly, it was increasingly difficult for her to fight against those winged duoluazongs who dodged her attacks nimbly in mid-air. Similarly, Hai Tianqing was doing his best to protect Lin Sanjiu. 90 kg dumbbells, he shouted as he kicked up a massive amount of sand. The flying duoluazongs flapped their wings desperately as the 90 kilograms grains of sands crushed them to the ground. With the two people protecting her, Lin Sanjia was surrounded by lumps of splattered flesh like pot stickers fillings. 15 seconds until cooldown. Lin Sanjia managed to disintegrate the 7th floor. All the broken down building materials and furniture floated upward and spun toward the center of the floor like a blender. However, they did not see a single drop of blood. There was no one on the 7th floor. "Huh? Miss Lin, did I forget to inform you that I have a personal room? I was once a human, so I value privacy a lot," they could hear the same unruffled male voice coming from the speakers. "It's alright. Because once you reach the time limit of your ability, you will be able to meet me. 9 seconds until cooldown. But, if you can still survive till then, why don't you search every building to look for me? How long more can you keep them back?" Lin Sanjiu asked loudly, ignoring the duoluazhong's taunt. "As long as you need." Hai Tianqing replied with a grin. He inhaled deeply as a duoluazhong pierced its mouthpart through his previous wound. After he said that, the weaponized fragments made from the entire 7th floor fell to the ground and reverted to their normal forms. "I want to take a gamble. I need both of you to hang in there." After she said that, Lin Sanjiu's body started to tremble slightly. This was the side effect of her pushing herself to her limits. Sweat gushed from her pores, flowing past her eyebrows and down her nose. Her tank top was gradually soaked with sweat. 5 seconds until cooldown. The attacks from the duoluazongs were getting more and more intense. Even with Hai Tianqing's sand dumbbells, Griselda's body was covered with multiple wounds. At that moment, multiple buildings in Oasis seemed to have lost their roofs, like a clean-shaven head. The broken weaponized fragments floated in the air, but the overall structure of the buildings remained stubbornly unchanged. 4 seconds until cooldown. "Move, damn it." Lin Sanjia gritted her teeth, her head was hurting as if multiple steel needles had pierced through her brain. 3 seconds until cooldown. How much longer will it take? Griselda can't last much longer. Su Xiaoyang, who stood behind them, couldn't help yelling out as she dodged the various duoluazongs' attacks agilely. The nearby buildings shook for a fraction of a second and were broken down in succession. 3 buildings were dissolved around the same time. The sharp weaponized building materials danced in mid-air, instantly killing off countless duoluazongs. Unfortunately, they could still hear the loathsome laughter over the speaker. "Good effort. 2 seconds until cooldown. I can't do this," I think I need to give up here. This flashed through Lin Sanjiu's groggy mind. If I knew this would happen, I wouldn't have acted so impulsively just because I was angry. I should have run away now. I can't leave even if I wanted, and I even implicate the others. My student, Lin Sanjiu. Special items are powered by your metabolic energy, but you've already used up all your energy. Amidst her dizziness, she vaguely heard Mrs. Monas's voice, "Do you want to use your cons?" As Lin Sanjiu was on the verge of total exhaustion, she could not clearly hear what Mrs. Monas said. She only answered instinctively, "Yes." The 5 minutes were up, and Lin Sanjiu's Pygmalion choker entered its cool-down state. As if they've suddenly sensed it, the two people who were currently fighting paused for a moment and looking into the distance. Half of the buildings in the factory compound were still intact. They stood firmly under the night sky, with no indication that anything had affected them. The speaker buzzed again, and the man's maniacal laughter filled Oasis. "Ha ha ha. I think that's the end of your..." Before he even finished his sentence, there was a large boom. The buildings, which appeared intact just moments, dissolved into fine dust in an instant. Before the Duoluazong's expressions could even change, they were ground into meat paste by the weaponized bits of dust. As if multiple TNT bombs had exploded in the large factory compound, Oasis disintegrated into a large pile of fine dust, along with all the Duoluazongs. The Duoluazong who had mocked them the entire time was finally now only a part of that pile. As the others watched silently in utter disbelief, Lin Sanjiu lose her consciousness and fell headfirst off the top of her truck. Hai Tianqing rushed over and caught her. Oasis has been totally destroyed in 30 seconds. Chapter 70, What Did You Say? While she was still in a half-conscious state, Lin Sanjiu could hear a constant soft pitter-patter sound which disturbed her utterly exhausted mind. From the jerky movements she felt, she could tell that she was in a vehicle. A packet of butter cookies, on top of a large carton, shifted about with the jerky movement of the bus, just like Lin Sanjiu. A furry paw appeared behind the carton as if it was trying to sneakily snatch the packet of cookies. However, the bus suddenly jerked, so the paw accidentally pushed the packet of cookies off the carton. Ack! The packet of cookies hit someone. The culprit stuck his head out and incidentally locked eyes with Lin Sanjiu. You're awake? Haha B. Rabbit 1 laughed dryly. Lin Sanjiu removed the packet of cookies from her face. She still felt giddy, but she slowly sat up and looked around. She was lying in the aisle of the bus. Apparently, someone thoughtful had spread out a towel before she laid down. She could see tall stacks of cartons beside her, and she figured that the others probably had to make space for her to lie down. At that moment, B. Rabbit climbed up to one of the top cartons. "Xiaoju? You're awake?" Hu Chenzai's voice rang out from the driver's seat as he took a second to look behind. When he saw that Lin Sanjiu could already sit up, his face immediately lit up. "That's great. I have been worried about you." After hearing that, her memories slowly came back to her, filling her groggy head. Fang Dan had been killed by 12. The first thought that emerged strangled her heart tightly. Who would have known that she was a consular officer? Thus, Lin Sanjiu came to accept that she didn't just lose the chance to get a visa, but more importantly, she has lost a friend. Subsequently, she began to summarize the events in her head. When the 5 executives were defeated, 12 took the opportunity and escaped while Oasis was empty. Marcy left ahead of them as she had to maintain the distance between herself and 12 to keep her corporeal form. Right now, Lin Sanjiu did not know where they were. "How's Marcy? Has Luther woken up? How long have I been sleeping?" Lin Sanjiu was only conscious about how dry her throat was when she started speaking. Hu Chenzai eyed Lin Sanjiu through the rearview mirror before he replied, sounded a little worried. "It has been a week. Luckily, you had a normal pulse and breathing rate. I nearly thought that you were dead." "A week?" Lin Sanjiu was shocked, and she immediately stood up. Her legs wobbled a little, and she nearly lost her balance. It has been that long? Then, Marcy. Hu Chunzhe already expected Lin Sanjiu's question. He couldn't help sighing as he replied, after you fainted, we discussed and decided to head in the same direction as Marcy. However, even after traveling for quite some distance, we didn't see Marcy. I guessed we might have taken a wrong turn, or perhaps they changed direction midway. That is to say, we lost contact with Marcy. Lin Sanjiu's head started to hurt. She found herself at a loss as her head pulsated with pain while her intense waves of emotions, anxiousness, worry, and remorse seemed to ebb a little. Instead, a rather comforting thought became clearer and clearer to her: no news might be the best news. Lin Sanjiu straightened her body and looked around the bus carefully. She felt some complicated feelings when she realized that, after staying at Oasis for less than 2 weeks, her previous companions were all gone and were replaced by a group of new faces. Ultimately, B.Rabbit took another packet of cookies. He tore open the packet with his teeth, and a small round puff appeared on one side of his cheek as he munched on the cookies noisily. Lin Sanjiu stared at the rabbit and frowned as her mind churned. Where is Professor Bai, Su Xiaoyang, and Hai Tianqing? Why is this rabbit here instead? Executive Hai is driving your truck now. As for Professor Bai, while you were unconscious, we found about 20-odd survivors in the rubble. They managed to escape the Duoluozongs. Professor Bai said that she needed to take responsibility for what she'd done, so she stayed behind with Su Xiaoyang. They intend to build a new refuge for humans, one without any Duoluozongs. However, without the technology from the Duoluozongs world, I think it will be diff. Hu Chunzhe couldn't help sounding a little emotional at this point. I'm sorry. Even though the items in the vehicles were yours, I left some of it with them based on my own discretion. That wasn't really a big deal to Lin Sanjiu. However, Lin Sanjiu found herself looking at B.Rabbit when Hu Chunzhe brought up the subject about food. Somehow B.Rabbit caught her gaze and tilted his head upward with an incomprehensible pride. Even though I found you both a little violent, but all of you are quite righteous. Besides, your combat skills are really pitiable, so I was worried for you. Thus, I decided to stay. Totally unconcerned about B.Rabbit's image, Hu Chunzhe blurted, he's lying. He is just a rabbit. So, no matter how powerful he is, there will always be someone stronger. Considering the fact that he might be caught and eaten any day, he's staying with us for his own safety. Plus, he is on good terms with Executive Hai. Despite the hardship that they had just gone through, Lin Sanjiu felt a slight urge to laugh when she saw B.Rabbit's furious face. Since everything was explained, her focus changed to the pitter-patter sound that she could still hear even though she was fully awake. She was stunned when she looked through the windows carefully. She couldn't even speak properly. It's. She didn't notice it previously because the white steam outside fogged up all the windows. She only saw the endless droplets of water lashing against the windows when she looked closer. They converged into a stream of water at the corners of the windows. Lin Sanjiu touched the windows, which were unbearably hot on a normal day. She found what she saw a little hard to believe and asked, "It's raining?" "Yup," B.Rabbit answered. He jumped down from the cartons and opened the packet of cookies which had previously fallen on Lin Sanjiu's face. As he ate, he continued, "It has already been days, and we're fed up with it. The rainwater is scalding hot, and it is not portable. It has a sulfur smell, we can't even drive quickly, and the windshield wipers are going to be totally damaged. It's super annoying." Oh. Lin Sanjiu still found the rain a novelty and watched it for some time. After a while, she even opened the windows. Just as the rabbit had described, the temperature of the water was only slightly lower than its boiling point. In the past, that temperature would have caused a bad burn, but right now, it only felt warm to Lin Sanjiu, and that sensation was quite comfortable. The smell of sulfur is really quite strong. Wait. Can't we treat this like a hot spring? Ever since the descent of hyperthermal hell, she was covered with perspiration every day, yet she could not take even one proper bath. She felt a sudden desire bubbling in her heart. For the past 2 months, she felt like she was a wild hog. Her skin was covered with layers upon layers of sand and dust mixed with her sweat, so her skin felt extremely rough. She immediately got Huchenze to stop the bus. Then, they called for Hai Tianqing to also park the truck. She quickly rallied the 2 men and a rabbit to go look for a bucket with her. Buckets seem like very common things, but when they tried to search for one, it was harder than they thought. This was especially true as all plastic items have already become deformed due to the temperature. They searched their surroundings but couldn't find any. In the end, Lin Sanjia rolled up her sleeves and dug a hole with the depth of half the height of a man. Then, she used some reflective sheets and some rocks to cover the bottom and the sides of the hole to prevent water from leaking out. As the rain was quite heavy, the hole was filled to the brim rather quickly, creating a hot spring tub. Even though the water didn't look that clean, but it was already a luxury. As for the men, they did not bother digging any holes. As they suddenly got into the mood for a bath, they treated the rain like an outdoor hot shower. Once they walked away, Lin Sanjia grabbed B. Rabbit without warning and pushed him into the water, laughing, "Come, you should also enjoy it." After she said that, she took her clothes and jumped into the tub. Wah! B. Rabbit's head popped out from the surface of the water and complained angrily, "Rabbits don't need to bathe." When he turned and saw Lin Sanjia's bare shoulders poking out from the waters, only half visible due to the steam, he clicked his tongue awkwardly and turned back to play with his ears. "Actually, I am a male rabbit." Lin Sanjia looked at the rabbit and said, "So what? You're still a rabbit." Even if he knew human speech, Lin Sanjia only treated him as a cute furry animal, so she did not feel embarrassed at all. "What's up with you anyway? Why can you speak and why do you have abilities?" Lin Sanjia asked casually as she continued to splash water at herself. "As you can see from how cute I am, I was once a pet rabbit. I am even of a famous breed." B. Rabbit seemed to have forgotten the awkwardness he felt previously once he started recalling his memories. He dragged his voice and started to tell his story, even though my owner was quite hateable as he always limited my freedom, but, to be honest, he still loved me. I remembered that on the day the temperature shot up, there was nothing in the house. There was no water and no food. Even though my owner was very weak, he left the house to look for food. He returned after one whole day covered with wounds. He had a packet of instant noodles and even managed to get a handful of grass. The pet rabbit of an acclaimed breed paused for a moment before he continued, sounding a little sad. "When I think back about it, it was really amazing that he managed to find some grass. But I was just a silly rabbit then, so I finished the grass with a few bites. I didn't think much about it. After I ate that grass, my intelligence gradually increased and I also developed abilities. Unfortunately, my owner couldn't endure any longer and passed away. That grass must have probably been a special item." Lin Sanjia tried to imagine the rabbit's owner. She felt that he must have been a very gentle person. She sighed and petted the rabbit's head as if to placate him. "Since you know that I'm a pet rabbit with a name, you can call me Yo Daddy," B. Rabbit said firmly. The hand on his head immediately pressed him into the water. After Lin Sanjia teased B. Rabbit for a while, the rabbit splashed her face with water using his ears. Maybe it was because she had some fun, or because the bath was really relaxing, but she felt a little better. After she felt that she was clean enough and encouraged by her terrible hunger since she had been unconscious for a week, Lin Sanjia finally climbed out of the hole reluctantly. She changed into a set of clean clothes that she had prepared beforehand. The scathing rain continued to pour from the sky as if to compensate for the previous dry days. Huge fogs of steam rose from the ground and filled the air. This constant production of steam created a dense fog which blocked their view. "Hey, Huchenze, are you two done bathing? Where are you? We are going over right now." Lin Sanjiu yelled out, "You better wear your clothes quickly." Hu Chunzai acknowledged her with an anxious mumble. "I already said that I'm a male rabbit, it's alright for me to look at them," Rabbit grumbled. Once she was certain of the direction, Lin Sanjiu and the rabbit headed toward Hu Chunzai's location. As the white fog was too thick, they couldn't really see the road, so it was a little tough. But it was not possible that we haven't reached him even after walking for 20 minutes, right? Lin Sanjiu thought to herself. After she shouted a few phrases in succession and did not receive any reply, Lin Sanjiu stopped. Her expression hardened. Rabbit also sensed that something was wrong. "That's weird. His voice definitely came from this direction, and he didn't sound this far." They exchanged a glance and started raising their guard. Just as they were about to take a step forward, the sound of a loud gong broke the silence of their foggy surroundings. They were startled. The sound of the gong seemed to come from all around them. "Good afternoon, everyone," they heard an enthusiastic voice but did not know where it was coming from. At that moment, people came out from the fog accompanied by quiet chatter. If those two people standing closest to her didn't look so shocked, at least they seemed more anxious than her. She would have punched them. The two people were whispering to each other, and they sounded very uneasy. They could see more and more figures within the fog. They could sense a strange and indescribable pressure gradually building up. Just when Lin Sanjiu was about to grab the rabbit and run, the loud voice boomed again, "So, is everyone present now? I am happy to welcome all of you to the year-end Red vs. White Challenge 2 to ring in the new year. TN1 As the brown rabbit is going to be a recurring character for a few chapters, his name will be translated as Rabbit from this chapter. Chapter 71, Rules and Regulations of Red vs. White. It was indeed the end of December. If the new world didn't descend upon their universe, everyone should be busy making preparations to celebrate the new year, but now. Oh no! The fog is too thick. The contestants can't see each other, we must just blow it away, the loud voice bellowed, and subsequently, he huffed and puffed using his own mouth. The thing that weirded everyone out was that the white fog started to move gradually. Most of the fog dissipated, revealing the original surroundings. "No, that's not right. This isn't our original surroundings." Lin Sanjiu's eyes widened when she saw the ground. She was standing in a large circle. There was a line in the middle of the circle, and one half of it was red while the other half was white. Lin Sanjiu, Rabbit, and the four other strangers standing near to her made up a six-persons team on the red side. Meanwhile, the white half of the circle was about 50 meters away, and there were also 6 people there. She saw two very familiar faces out of the 6 people in the other team. One of them was the bespectacled Hu Chunzai, who always looked prim and proper. The other was Hai Tianqing, who was so large that the others withdrew from him, forcing his 5 other members to stand at the sides of the circle. The 3 people and 1 rabbit exchanged glances with each other, finding it a little hard to respond to what had just happened. When Hu Chunzai saw the circle on the ground, his mouth moved anxiously, and he started gesturing with both his hands. Watching him for a while, Lin Sanjiu couldn't hear him at all. It was as if there was an invisible partition which blocked off the sound from the other half of the circle. Lin Sanjiu finally reacted when she heard that loud voice again. She turned around and tried to search for its source. Oddly, even though the wind, which dissipated the fog around them, came from the direction where the announcer was standing, the announcer himself remained hidden in the thick fog, so she couldn't make out his face. "I'm Mr. The host of this pocket dimension. It's an honor to meet all of you here. Can you see all your team members now? The people who are standing within the same semicircle are your team members, and your opponents are the people in the opposite semicircle. Come on. Before we begin the Red vs. White challenge, why don't you introduce yourself to your fellow members?" As Mr. Finished his sentence, a man standing beside Lin Sanjiu immediately retorted, "Hey, are you crazy? This is not the right time to hold such a stupid challenge. I don't have time to play your games." The man looked to be only about slightly over 20. He had a crew cut, and he seemed to be quite irascible. "Are all of you just gonna stay here?" he yelled out. Since nobody replied, he turned and left, ignoring the others. His silhouette quickly disappeared into the fog. Mr. Dot appeared to be unaffected by the man's departure. He remained silent as if waiting for everyone to start on their introductions. Due to the man's action, the remaining 5 people didn't say a word as they stared at the leaving figure. They only started interacting with each other when they could no longer see him. Other than Lin Sangio and B. Rabbit, the red team consisted of 2 people, who were obviously a couple, and a middle-aged man. The petite young woman with a straight fringe looked very nervous as she held the corner of her boyfriend's shirt. Her boyfriend was not very tall, he was very fair and slightly plump. He reminded Lin Sangio of a milk pudding in clothes. At that moment, he was comforting his girlfriend with a gentle voice. The middle-aged man had a gloomy-looking face, and he stood alone on the side. As the warm rain was still pouring down on them, everyone was soaked. Their clothes stuck to their skins tightly, becoming partially transparent. The round beer belly under the middle-aged man's shirt could clearly be seen while he leered at all the women in the arena non-stop. This seemed to be a habit he had his entire life, something that wouldn't change even after the end of the world. As Lin Sangio was wearing a black singlet and baggy camo pants, there was nothing to see. However, the other woman in her team was wearing a cotton burlap skirt. The woman hid behind her boyfriend all this time. She was clearly uncomfortable when the middle-aged man looked over. When the middle-aged man's lecherous gaze floated past the women in the white team for the 4th time, a woman, wearing a mini skirt which showed off her pair of long legs, couldn't tolerate that man any longer. She sprinted toward the red team, but just as she was about to step on the line in the middle, she revealed an expression of shock before she immediately pulled back, stopping just behind the line. After that, the long-legged woman gave the middle-aged man a vicious glare, her lips pursed into a thin line, and she returned to her team members. "It seems like we can't cross the boundaries, and we also can't hear our opponents." Both Lin Sangio and Hu Chunzhe could see the doubts in each other's face. Lin Sangio observed the members of the white team, then she looked at Hu Chunzhe and shook her head. She did not know if he understood what she was trying to express. "Hey!" Just then, a voice came from behind the members of the red team, and it instantly grabbed the attention of everyone. Lin Sangio looked behind and saw the previously agitated man. He was startled when he realized that he was standing behind the 5 other members. However, Lin Sangio was not surprised. "I must have lost my way," the brash man mumbled as he turned to walk away, still unwilling to give up. "Don't waste your effort." Lin Sangio couldn't stand it any longer, so she finally called him to stop. "If we are in a pocket dimension, no one can get out unless we complete the given tasks." Once she said that, all the members of the red team were stunned. Just as she had expected, the people here were all original survivors of hyperthermal hell, so they had probably never heard of the thing called pocket dimension. This was also the first time that B. Rabbit had heard about this matter. As the subject on pocket dimensions sounded quite outrageous, Lin Sangio tried her best to simplify her explanation. Despite that, the other members still held their misgivings. Instead, when B. Rabbit spoke, they looked even more shocked. Regardless the uncertainty and doubts they had, everyone stayed behind after some commotion. After 5 minutes, they heard clapping sounds coming from Mr. Dot's direction. This ended the conversations within the 2 teams. "I am glad to see that all of you are getting along quite well with your team members." Mr. Dot said this with a light-hearted tone as he left. However, his next sentence made it difficult for anyone to relax. "But, one of the members of the red team did not comply with my suggested course of action and even tried to leave on his own accord. I regret to inform all of you that I have to deduct 1 point from the red team even before the games begin." After he said that, a -1 appeared in mid-air above the ground near the boundary line on the red side. It was even glowing faintly. They did not know how the -1 would affect them, but the expression of all the members of the red team turned grim because they had some sense that it wasn't something good. If we don't comply with his suggestions, he will penalize us by deducting points from our scores. Lin Sanjiu considered this, feeling a little troubled. They didn't really talk much with each other just now, and she didn't even get to know their names. She only secretly gave them each a nickname. Does this already count as an introduction? She was still pondering about the matter when the host spoke again. Luckily, one of the members of the red team provided her own team with some basic information on pocket dimensions. Thus, the red team can get one treasure chest. This immediately roused a quiet commotion within the red team. Even though no one knew what that treasure chest was, it was clearly something beneficial. They all thought that this would perhaps close the gap between both teams, so their faces seemed to lighten a bit, but Mr. Dot continued, for the same reason, the white team can also get one treasure chest. All of you might be wondering, what's the use of a treasure chest? So, now I will list out and explain the rules of today's challenge. Year-end Red vs White Challenge. Number of contestants, 6 people in each team, 12 people in total. Rules. 1. Mr. Dot will decide on 4 games. Not all team members are required to compete in each game. Each team only needs to send out the minimum number of required contestants for each game. In addition to that, the number of contestants sent out from each team must be the same. 2. There is no limit to the number of times a member can join a game, but every member must join at least 2 games or face a death penalty. 3. The contestant for each game must be voted by the team. A member can only be a contestant if they get a majority vote from their team. 4. Some games will provide you an additional opportunity to gain points. If a contestant manages to discover and gain the additional point in the game, the team will be awarded +1 points. Winning a game will gain you +1 points. The team with the highest score will win. 5. Similarly, there is also a risk of losing your points in a game. 6. Under special circumstances, teams can get special treasure chests. The rewards range from the incredible heaven-sent gift of +10 points to -10 points. The possibilities are endless. 7. Before every game commences, the team members from each team who are not participating will have to offer up one of their own items as a prize. The prize can be a special item or an active skill. After the members have offered their prizes, all the prizes from the losing team will be given to the winning team. For example, if member A from the red team offers his fart propelling ability and the red team loses, then this fart propelling ability will be given to one of the members of the white team. If all the members participate in the game, the prizes will be randomly chosen by Mr. Dot. 8. The team will discuss and decide on how the prizes should be distributed. If the discussions reach a stalemate, Mr. Dot will make a judgment and distribute the prizes based on the individual contribution of each member. The member with the greatest contribution will receive the prizes. 9. The losing team for the entire challenge will not only have to return all the prizes that they have won. They would also be stripped of all their active abilities and special items. These will also become prizes for the winning team. In addition to that, each of the members of the winning team can receive a special prize from Mr. Dot. 10. The pocket dimension will end after the winning team has been decided. After they heard those 10 lengthy rules, everyone remained silent for a very long time. From when they first heard Mr. Dot speaking, it was only now that everyone accepted the situation in front of them. If there is a possibility of getting a crappy penalty from the treasure chest, why the f***ck does he call it a treasure chest? The brash man cursed. I am more worried about the matter regarding the prizes, the fair-skinned boyfriend said worriedly. Even though we have no idea what the games are, if our opponents gained an additional ability, it would be a great disadvantage for us. His girlfriend turned pale, and she even sounded like she was about to sob. I only have one ability. I can't offer my ability as a prize. Without my ability, I will definitely die very quickly. Her boyfriend was quick to comfort her with his gentle voice. He held her hands tightly and said, "Don't be afraid. No one will force you. Even though the pot-bellied middle-aged man said nothing, at least he stopped leering at the women. His thick eyelids drooped while he seemed to be deep in thought. Lin Sanjiu and B. Rabbit exchanged glances, both their expressions were dead serious. Even though they roughly knew all the 10 rules, they didn't know why they had a feeling that those rules were filled with pitfalls and traps. Besides, both herself and B. Rabbit were in an almost impossible situation. They not only need to win but they can't let Hu Chenzhe and Hai Tianqing lose. The rules have been explained. Please send the member who contributed to the team up here to receive the prize. Naturally, on the red team, that member was Lin Sanjiu. She hesitated for a while and glanced over at the white team. Lin Sanjiu was aware that the particular member from the white team would be a formidable opponent. Since that person knew what a pocket dimension was, there was a high possibility that the person came from another world. Comparing their experience and their abilities, it would probably be difficult to deal with that person. When she turned to look, she saw a skinny woman walking away from the white team. Lin Sanjiu mistook her for an elderly woman when she first saw her. But upon closer inspection, Lin Sanjiu realized that the woman was in her 40s or 50s. The woman looked much older than she really was, as her face was covered with wrinkles and her triangular eyes drooped listlessly. That woman even had a rather acrimonious appearance. This haggard-looking woman eyed Lin Sanjiu for a second and looked forward again. She walked directly into the fog. Lin Sanjiu finally reacted and removed the rabbit from her shoulders hurriedly and also walked into the fog. Once the white fog surrounded her, she saw a black wooden chest not far from her, but she couldn't even see a lock. If she reached out for it, she could easily open it. She turned to look behind her, but she could no longer see her team members. Lin Sanjiu inhaled sharply and closed her eyes as she opened the treasure chest. Chapter 72, Your Fate Depends on Sugoroku, 1. Ding dong, the chest opened revealing its empty base. Lin Sanjiu was stunned. She touched the bottom of the chest, finding it hard to believe that it was totally empty. From what she felt, it was just a normal wooden chest. There was really nothing in it. Does this mean that I got an empty chest by chance? Okay, both contestants, please return to your teams after you have collected your prizes. Mr. Dot's voice suddenly rang out. Even though Lin Sanjiu was puzzled, she had no choice but to leave. Before she left, she touched the bottom of the chest again. Luckily, Mr. Dot did not seem to notice and didn't say anything. When Lin Sanjiu was walking back, she turned to observe the skinny woman on the other side walking out from the white fog. That woman was frowning and appeared to be baffled. When she returned to the red semicircle, her team members surrounded her and asked her worriedly, "What did you get?" Lin Sanjiu shook her head, expressing that she did not know. Just then, Mr. Dot aptly made an announcement. "Now I'll announce the prize that each of the team received. Red team, congratulations. You received a chance to pass. You can skip a task in one of the games if you use this chance. On the other hand, the white team isn't that lucky. You have unlocked a witch's curse. The next time you gain 2 consecutive points, 1 point will be deducted." Apart from Lin Sanjiu and B. Rabbit, the 4 other members of the red team couldn't help letting out a sigh of relief. Even though they were still unclear about the situation they were in, their expression became a little less tense. The penalty which the white team received was not that serious, but in some sense, it helped to balance out the scores again. "Since we are not at a disadvantage, I think this could be something good," the pot-bellied man said unexpectedly. His eyes widened, and the corner of his lips revealed a faint gluttonous excitement. "If we win this challenge, we can get someone else's active abilities and items. Don't you find it rather tempting?" The others were quite stunned by this man's frankness. The brash man licked his lips and looked over at the white team members, mumbling, "That's right, that huge man over there looks strong. It will be great if I could get his ability." The huge man was undoubtedly Hai Tianqing. Lin Sanjiu felt a little uncomfortable about that comment. She shot a glance at the brash man. The fair-skinned man showed his disapproval with a bitter smile and quietly said, "Beggar thy neighbor?" That's. His girlfriend tugged his sleeve and consoled softly, "Honey, we didn't set the rules. I'm satisfied as long as we don't lose." The words that the woman said actually meant the same thing as the other two men, but it was just more tactful. When the other two men heard this, they nodded vehemently and repeated her words. With that, the fair-skinned man couldn't really say anything else, and thus the few of them came to a consensus within the short exchange of words. Even though they already knew that they were on the same team earlier, it was only now that they felt a slight sense of camaraderie as they shared a common enemy. The pot-bellied man offered his thick pudgy hands as he laughed and said, "My surname is Wang. I used to run a small business, but right now, that's not relevant." "Boss Wang." The brash man shook his hand. "My surname is Chen. You can just call me Chen Fan. I'm quite an impulsive person, so I seek your understanding. Hey, just call me Old Wang. I am not a boss or anything." After Old Wang had shaken Chen Fan's hand, he offered his hand to the woman with a straight fringe. No woman in this world would willingly shake that man's hand. She pulled her wet shirt, which was now partially transparent due to the rain, from her body and hid behind her boyfriend before she replied uneasily, "I'm Laura Lian, and this is my boyfriend, Zhong Junkai." "Oh." Old Wang replied curtly and eyed the fair-skinned Zhong Junkai for a second with an unreadable expression. Then, he offered his hand to Lin Sanjiu, "And your?" "My surname is Linear." She crossed her arms as she threw a sideward glance at Old Wang's hand. The latter hesitated for a moment before he pulled back his hand sheepishly. Wearing a black tank top and camo pants, Lin Sanjiu looked like she just came out of a bloodbath. Her serious frown along with the multiple bandages on her body gave her a presence which was more than enough to deter the others from trying to engage in any random conversations with her. After everybody got acquainted, the atmosphere became a little livelier. After lamenting about the apocalyptic state of their world, they gradually started to smile, proving that humans have an incredible ability to adapt to their situation despite everything. With a sweeping glance, Lin Sanjiu found that the white team members also had similar reactions. Setting aside Hu Chenzai and Hai Tianqing, the remaining members' eyes shone with excitement and eagerness. Apparently, they also view the red team as their tempting rewards. Acting like she was just exploring the place, Lin Sanjiu created some distance between herself and the others. After that, she whispered to B. Rabbit, who was back on her shoulder, "I think there is something very wrong with this challenge." B. Rabbit was currently in a bad mood because they had left him out when everybody was introducing themselves. "What's wrong?" he said, looking unhappily. "You don't sense it?" Lin Sanjiu looked down expressionlessly. "Those 10 rules are really weird. There are lots of restrictions between members in the same team, way more than necessary. I think that such alliances based on common interest are too fragile. I'm a little worried." B. Rabbit immediately stared at her with his pair of black eyes. "What are you worried about? You're small, so you can easily go unnoticed when you're not talking. I hope you can help me keep an eye on the others." Lin Sanjiu did not answer him directly. "I think I overused one of my abilities, so it is currently sealed right now. I'm not in my best condition." When she was fighting back in Oasis, she vaguely heard Mrs. Mana's voice asking her whether she wanted to do something. After she woke up, she nearly forgot about that. However, Lin Sanjiu quickly realized that something was wrong. When she tried to enter the school of higher consciousness, she saw only a lifeless patch of gray in front of her, as if the ability had been totally sealed. When she thought about it, it was quite unbelievable that she could destroy Oasis entirely, considering her remaining strength at that point. That event was definitely linked to the reason why her ability was sealed, but before she even had a clue, they entered this pocket dimension, of all times. I am happy to see all of you getting into the swing of things. Since everyone has grown familiar with each other, it's time to start the first game. Mr. Dot said enthusiastically. The arena buzzed with chatter as everyone looked toward the white fog with expectant faces even though they couldn't see Mr. Dot clearly. The name of the first game is Your Fate Depends on Sugoroku. Let me explain how you should play this game. Sugoroku 1 is a type of popular board game, and Monopoly is the most famous variant of this game. In a normal game, the player must roll 2 dices, then move his pieces forward according to the number of pips. The person who reaches the finishing point first would be considered the winner. But Your Fate Depends on Sugoroku is slightly different. The player will start from their own side respectively. The first person to pass all 16 squares to reach the finishing point will be the winner. But, the number of steps you can advance is determined by your opponent. What? After Mr. Dot said that, a series of questions erupted within the teams. If the winner is the first person who reaches the finishing point, then, as a player, I would stop my opponent from reaching first, right? Lara asked her boyfriend, perplexed. But Mr. Dot continued, now, for the rules of this game, when deciding the number of steps that your opponent can move, the minimum is 1 step, and the maximum is not larger than the number of squares left. So, if your opponent is on the second square, the largest number of steps you can get him or her to advance is 16-2 equals 14, so he or she will end up 1 step away from the last square. You cannot refuse to state a number, you cannot choose 0, and you cannot ask your opponent to move backward. That means, even if the opponent determines the number of steps to advance, the player can still go forward even if it is 1 step at a time. Lin Sanjiu mumbled to herself, the white team will determine how many steps we will go forward, but we can also determine theirs. To ensure that this game is totally fair and that there is no first mover advantage, there is no need to determine who shall move first. Mr. Dot sounded quite cheerful when he said that. After both teams have informed me about their chosen number, I will announce the number of steps to move, then both players will move accordingly. Thus, resolving that issue, if both players reach the finishing point at the same time, then the winner will be determined by a duel. The minimum number of players for this game is 2, and the maximum number of players is also 2. And he still calls it a game. In the end, isn't it still determined by a duel? Lara was a quick thinker. She wiped off the water on her face and grumbled, who would let their opponent move ahead of them? It would probably end with both players reaching the finishing point at the same time, then battling it out. Don't worry, I think no one would choose you as a contestant for this game, Zhong Junkai comforted her gently. At this point, Chen Fan raised his voice and said, if we have to fight, it is best to rely on us, guys. Suddenly, 16 squares appeared on both the red and white semicircles, creating a small route. Near to the end of the route, which was the boundary line between both semicircles, both routes led to an additional square with a yellow border. It was the finishing square. However, other than the finishing point, there was a question mark on each of the squares, and no one knew what they represented. Is everybody ready? Please choose your contestants in 5 minutes. The first game finally commenced with Mr. Dot's words. Chapter 73, Your Fate Depends on Sugoroku, 2. After Mr. Dot said that, everyone's expressions turned a little weird. For this game of Sugoroku, each team could only send 1 player each. According to Rule 7, before every game commences, the team members from each team who are not participating will have to offer up one of their own items as a prize. Thus it was obvious that everyone wanted to be the contestant for the game. After all, the contestant would not receive any sort of penalty even if he or she loses. However, the remaining team members would have to give up their item. Before the first game even officially started, everyone avoided each other's gaze and lowered their heads, contemplating. Since no one spoke even after some time, Lara asked in a quiet, mousy voice, well, who should represent us for this game? Without showing a shred of modesty, Chen Fan answered her boldly, didn't I address that just now? In the end, this game would be determined by a duel. So, of course, we should choose a male contestant. Lara's face froze for a second, unable to immediately argue against him. As if to remedy to her mistake, she quickly added, "You can't put it that way. The players would use their abilities to duel, so it is not about one's physical strength. Besides, if the white team chooses a female contestant, then I and Miss Lin can also be chosen. No matter who participates, I don't have any opinion on." Zhong Junkai seemed to be little reserved about it, but before he finished his sentence, his girlfriend pulled his shirt sleeve, so he swallowed the remaining words. Old Wang looked at Lara, but this time he wasn't staring at her breasts. "Little girl, you're too naive. The first game is the most stressful round. You are just a delicate lady. What will we do if you somehow can't take the pressure? If nobody objects, I can be the contestant." When he said that, the other members, except for the expressionless Lin Sanjiu and B. Rabbit, instantly felt a little uneasy. Lin Sanjiu remained silent as she watched the other members bicker. Suddenly, she raised her voice and asked, "Mr. How will you judge the duel?" The rest of her red team members zipped their mouths once she shouted and waited intently for Mr. Dot's reply. "Wow, this is a coincidence." The white team also asked the same question. "I will answer both teams at the same time." Mr. Dot paused for a few seconds before he spoke again. "Since it is a duel, it shall end when one of the party dies." B. Rabbit staggered at that remark and nearly fell off Lin Sanjiu's shoulder. The members of the red team sitting in their small circle immediately fell silent. Considering the 50% chance of dying, the importance of their abilities or items diminished. However, due to their previous behavior where they nearly got into a fight trying to be the chosen contestant, the current atmosphere was still very tense. Everyone was trying to find a way to excuse themselves discreetly, and Old Wang was the first to speak. "If the opposite team send out the old woman, I'll be the contestant." The members of the white team were mostly at their prime age. With his outstanding physique, Hai Tianqing looked menacing no matter where he stood. The long-legged woman with the red miniskirt was tall and feisty. The remaining members, including Hu Chenze, were also healthy young men. Only that woman who looked old beyond her years seemed like the weakest link. Hearing his words, the others naturally understood what he meant, and faint, superficial smiles appeared on their faces. Just when the red team was still undecided, Mr. Raised his voice and unexpectedly said, "Okay. Our white team have decided on their contestant. Can the contestant please walk up to the starting point? Red team, you still have 2 minutes." The members of the red team turned their heads to look at the white team. An average-looking young man who was about 1.8 m walked toward the starting point. He grinned at the red team and loosened his neck and shoulders as he reached the starting point. Once he stood in position, he suddenly slammed his fist on the ground. The impact it caused drove away a lot of the remaining white fog in the arena. It was so strong that even the red team could feel the tremors. When he straightened himself, there was a hole beside the square he was standing in, and that hole was the size of a human's head. The red team grew silent when they saw his simple but effective threat. It might be painful for them to lose their items, but the risk of dying was worse. "Well, I'll participate." Surprising, Lin Sanjiu volunteered while everyone kept quiet. The others looked relieved as if they had just been saved. Lara smiled with her pallid face. "Ah, Miss Lin, you're confident in your combat abilities? I'm so envious, but please be careful. How could we let a woman like you fine? We can't do anything if you insist," Chen Fan added. Meanwhile, Old Wang just chuckled. Zhong Junkai raised his brow and said, "Miss Lin, you don't have to risk your life just because of those prizes. It's all right. I've already made up my mind." Lin Sanjiu smiled at him, her ember eyes shone beautifully. After that, she stood up and looked at her team members. "I guess no one has any objections. If you support my decision to participate, please raise your hands." After all, the rules stated that the contestant must get the votes from their team members. 4 arms rose one after the other. After a long hesitation, a tiny rabbit rose. Rabbit whispered in Lin Sanjio's ear, "Hey, are you confident about this? If you fight using that useless ability of yours, you might just die immediately." Lin Sanjio glared at him, "We'll just have to see how it goes. I still have some confidence in fighting." Anxious, Rabbit wanted to say more but was interrupted. Our red team have also decided on their contestant. Could the contestant from the red team also proceed to the starting point? Like the ending point, the square for the starting point did not have a question mark symbol. There was only a simple start in it. Even though there were 34 squares between them, they were not far from each other. She could even see the young man's exceptionally lengthy eyebrows. The young man grinned cheekily at her as if he had a hidden trick up his sleeve. Now that the contestants were in position, it was time for the teams to hand over their offerings. There were 5 remaining members in both red and white teams. Just as how Lin Sanjio received the reward from the treasure chest, the members went into the white fog successively, thus no one knew what the other had offered. When each of them came out from the fog, they all had complex expressions, just like new investors who were uncertain about their investments. For the first round, I received 5 special items from the white team and 5 special items from the red team. For these precious prizes, do you best, contestants. Mr. Dot announced gleefully after all the prizes have been gathered. Lin Sanjio was quite surprised by the outcome. She did not expect that everyone in the arena had a special item to offer. There wasn't even a single active skill being offered in this first round. Sigh. That's it? I thought that the other team would offer some active skills. Chen Fan even mumbled disappointedly. He was not the only one who was disappointed. Lin Sanjio could see that the atmosphere in the white team was similar. Is everyone ready? The first game Your Fate Depends on Sugoroku will officially begin now. While Mr. Dot spoke, Rabbit, who was missing a collar from his neck, stood on his 2 hind legs, watching Lin Sanjio nervously. Both teams were still unable to hear their opponents, so everyone could only hear Mr. Dot. Alright, our white team contestant has already informed me about his chosen number. Could the contestant from the red team decide on a number? 1 square, Lin Sanjio replied without thinking. In this game, the smallest number was 1 and they couldn't choose 0, neither could they force the opponent to move backward, thus she could predict that the opponent would also say 1. Okay, I will now announce the chosen number from both teams. Mr. Dot said even louder, 1 step forward for the white team, and 1 step forward for the red team. As expected, both teams made their opponents move only 1 step forward. Lin Sanjio and the young man caught each other's gaze, they quickly averted their eyes and took a step forward, landing on the first square. Ding dong, she heard a familiar sound. The question mark symbol disappeared from under her feet, and a cartoon of a crying man and a dog appeared in the square. Before Lin Sanjio's confusion appeared on her face, Mr. Dot suddenly said, "Ah, both teams are very unlucky. The contestant of the white team has knocked down an old man. To pay for the old man's medical fee, the white team loses a prize." The members of both the red and white team were all stunned. As they were all distracted by the unique rules of this game, they'd all forgotten that there were chance and community chest cards in Monopoly, and that landing on certain tiles could mean a reward or a penalty, such as winning 5 million on the lottery or being dragged off by the police. Without considering the contestants' feelings, Mr. Dot continued, "Even if the white team win this round, they will only be able to collect back 4 items, and the 5 items from the other team, the confiscated prize, will be added to a random treasure chest. This will become an individual prize for the person who opens that chest. Individual prize, that means that it is not part of the team prize." As for the red team, Lin Sanjio immediately listened very carefully. The contestant from the red team had accidentally stepped on a dog's tail. The dog chased her through 2 streets, so she lost her shoes. To buy a pair of new shoes, the red team had to sell off one of the prizes. That prize is also added to one of the treasure chests. It had only been 3 minutes since the game commenced, Yet both teams had already lost one prize each. Right now, no matter who won, they would only get back 4 of their own items and another 4 from the other team. That's only 8 items in total. Even though the 2 items have been added to the treasure chests, nobody knew how they could obtain the treasure chests, and whether they could even get the right treasure chest with the prizes was already a problem. The expressions of the members from both teams grew somber. Chapter 74, Your Fate Depends on Sugoroku, 3. Okay, Team White has already given me their number. Now, it's Red Team's turn, Mr. Dot called out a second time. After Mr. Dot had revealed the choices for the first round, both Lin Sanjiu and that young man stood in the first squares with slightly tensed expression. As she looked at the question mark symbol on the second square, she frowned. What is under that question mark? She couldn't help thinking to herself. 1 square, she gave the same answer. For the second turn, 1 step forward for the white team, and 1 step forward for the red team. When Mr. Dot finished his sentence, the non-participating members from each team looked as if they had predicted what would happen. The design of the game seemed totally meaningless to all of them. Since the number of steps forward was determined by one's opponent, it was logical that both players would choose the slowest route forward for their opponent, until the finishing point where they will fight it out. But is that really the case? Lin Sanjiu pondered as she stepped into the second square. If the game could only be determined by a duel, then wouldn't it make more sense for the game to be a pure fighting match? Once again, she heard the familiar ding-dong. The question mark symbol beneath her feet disappeared and was replaced by a picture of a jam-packed road. Lin Sanjiu looked up and saw her opponent's bewildered, frowning face. Oh dear! Mr. Dot exclaimed in an exaggerated manner, just when the 2 contestants stepped into the next square. The New Year bell has rung. As the contestant from the white team set off some fireworks illegally, he was fined. -1 point for the white team. Before anyone could process the fact that the New Year had arrived, the members of both teams looked toward the fog with rather blank expressions shortly after. Unlike the white team, the red team quickly became excited, and all their faces lit up. On the other hand, the young man from the white team looked almost ready to rush into the white fog to argue with Mr. Dot. Hey! There's something wrong here. Didn't you say that we will get 1 point when we win the game? How could you just deduct our points whenever you want? Doesn't that mean that even if I win this game, it'll be for nothing? He raged. Hu Chenzai and Hai Tianqing, who were standing behind that man, exchanged a glance with each other when they heard his rant. They did not know if they should be happy or concerned. Despite their conflicted emotions, they did not show how they really felt. Both concealed their true expressions after they saw Lin Sanjiu's signal. They did it so well that none of the members of the white team realized that they actually had friends in the red team. Have you forgotten what I said in the rules regarding gaining and losing points? Mr. Dot's tone remained unchanged as he maintained his stance. If you want to earn more points, you'll have to try harder to look for ways to gain them. The young man spat angrily, and his eyes bore into the 10 over squares in front of him, as if he could spot the difference between the multiple question mark symbols on the ground. As for our red team contestant, Mr. Dot continued, too many people wanted to watch the New Year fireworks, so she was unfortunately stuck in a traffic jam. She will have to skip the next turn. When they heard the word skip, their smiles fell off their faces. You must be kidding. Lara jumped up. If she skips a turn, that means that she won't move forward the next round, right? Then, what's there to compete? Wouldn't that mean that the other team has already won? According to the rules, the smallest number than Lin Sanjiu could call out was 1. If she was 1 step behind her opponent, and each of them could only move 1 step per turn, this would mean that she had already lost. No, that's not right. Zhong Junkai's brows furrowed as he thought carefully about it, and he suddenly said, this skip penalty could determine whether a team wins or loses. It's not possible that it exists only on our side, right? That would be too unfair. I'm sure that there is also that penalty on the opponent's route. Everyone thought that what he said made sense. Old Wan clapped his hands and agreed wholeheartedly, Xiao Zhong is right. I think the crucial point of this game is the squares with the skip penalty. Whoever is unluckier would step on more of these penalties and lose the game. B.Rabbit shot a glance at the other and did not say a word. When everyone was introducing themselves previously, no one even bothered to ask for his name. He felt as if they didn't treat him as one of the members but rather as Lin Sanjiu's pet. When he thought about this, he decided to speak as little as possible and sat down quietly like any normal rabbit. While the four members of the red team discussed a little more, Mr. Dot revealed the outcome of the third turn, one step forward for the white team and the red team remains in the same spot. At that point, the young man's fury over the point deduction had abated. He looked at Lin Sanjiu intentionally as he stepped on the third square smugly. During the year-end company dinner, the contestant from the white team won a treasure chest in a lucky draw. But when he looked at it, he realized that it was a dirty, broken chest which was marked by the label Chest of Misfortune. White team contestant, do you wish to open this chest? No one expected that the contestant could actually choose whether to open a treasure chest that was on the square. The young man seemed apprehensive and found that he could not decide. After some time, he turned to his team members, seeking their opinion. Even though he could not make any conversations with them, they could see each other, so they only needed to nod or shake their heads. The old woman nodded her head, but the others shook their heads, frowning. Since it was clearly stated that it was a chest of misfortune, why should he take the risk? The young man turned back and said something, gritting his teeth. From his reaction, Lin Sanjiu guessed that he gave up opening the chest. He made the right decision, and this was proved by Mr. Dot's words. The contestant from the white team decided not to open the chest. The venomous snake in the chest was unable to bite anyone. The young man couldn't help sighing a breath of relief when he thought about the possible consequences of getting bitten. Ever since the game started, both teams had suffered heavy penalties. He felt lucky just to have avoided that calamity. For the next turn, both contestants moved forward one step as predicted. This time, the red team lost another prize because according to the square, they borrowed money from a loan shark. Whereas, the white team had to skip a turn because their car broke down. Just as what Zhong Junkai said, there were skip penalties on both routes. When it was the fourth turn, both contestants were in the fourth square, so they were at the same pace once again. Both contestants had better luck for this turn. The contestant from the red team rested at a hotel and did not win or lose anything. The contestant from the white team found a treasure chest and received an undo one move. Current stats. Red team, 3 prizes, -1 point, a chance to pass, 4th square. White team, 4 prizes, -1 point, a chance to undo one move, bound by a -1 curse, 4th square. After the 5th turn, both contestants moved another 1 square forward, and each lost a prize. The red team watched helplessly as the prizes they had offered was reduced to only 2 items, and their expressions turned sour. Chen Fan even suspected that the setup was just a scam to cheat people out of their items, but that was just his conjecture, and ultimately, he couldn't muster up his courage to enter the white fog and confront Mr. Dot about it. Both contestants went through 7 turns in this fashion, still maintaining their tied position, suffering losses with every step. Even though the scenarios behind each question mark symbol was different, almost all of them had bad outcomes. It was to the extent that they felt lucky when they set on a square with no particular effects. Everyone seemed to have forgotten their goal to win items from the other teams and were instead concerned about reducing their losses. Current stats after 7 turns. Red team, 2 prizes, -2 points, a chance to pass, a chance to take a 5 minutes break mid-game, 7th square. White team, 3 prizes, -2 points, a chance to undo one move, bound by a -1 curse, 7th square. When Mr. Dot was about to announce the outcome of the 8th turn, all the members of the red team were already sitting on the ground, looking at the game listlessly, occasionally making some conversation. They were all dejected and even bored with the game. Anyway, both contestants had already decided to move forward one step per turn, suffering losses with each step, so there was really nothing they could look forward to. So, they had already decided to just wait for the duel at the end. With such an atmosphere, B.Rabbit was the first one to realize that something was different because Mr. Dot did not announce the outcome of the 8th turn even after some time. Feeling curious, he looked and saw that Lin Sanjia was facing the white fog. She seemed to be talking to someone and Mr. Dot was the only person in that direction. Even though they couldn't hear what she was saying, Lin Sanjia's action quickly drew the attention of the members of both teams. After a while, Mr. Dot suddenly said, "Okay." Then, they heard nothing else. Huh? Why does it seem like Miss Lin is talking to the other contestant? Lara muttered to herself after watching them for some time. Did she just made a request to Mr. Dot to allow her to speak to the other contestant? When they heard what she said, the other members of the red team watched what happened in astonishment. They were unable to see Lin Sanjia's face as her back was against them, but they could clearly see the face of the contestant from the white team. First, they saw the young man looking quite shocked. After that, he frowned and eyed Lin Sanjia suspiciously. Observing her from the back, Lin Sanjia seemed rather worked up as she gestured her arms wildly for some time. After they had both chatted for a long time, the young man nodded hesitantly, and they both seemed to have reached an agreement. Once she got the cooperation of her opponent, Lin Sanjia immediately heaved a sigh of relief, and her shoulders relaxed. Shortly after, Mr. Dot announced the outcome of the 8th turn with great curiosity and suspicion from both teams. 3 steps forward for the white team. 1 step forward for the red team. Chapter 75, Your Fate Depends on Sugoroku, 4. Rain intertwined with white steam fell continuously from the sky like silver threads. The water droplets turned to steam the moment they reached the ground, adding to the already thick white fog around them. The red team stood surrounded by fog, and in that instant, they really hoped that they misheard those words because their ears were filled with water. The white team gets to move 3 steps forward. Chen Fan was the first to leap up. If it wasn't for Mr. Dot, he would have rushed up and grabbed Lin Sanjia and shake her till she came to her senses. What's that woman doing? Why did she let the white team move 3 steps? With the exception of B.Rabbit, the other members of the red team had the same disgruntled expressions. As if to rub salt in the wound, the young man from the white team took 3 steps forward quickly. After that, he paused and turned to Lin Sanjia and the red team deliberately and showed them his beaming face. He pointed to Lin Sanjia and said something, then shook his head as if lamenting Lin Sanjia's stupidity. While the red team was bewildered and angered by the outcome, Mr. Dot spoke just at the right time. What a pity. Who would have guessed that the strategy from the red team contestant failed? Let me explain to everyone what has just happened. The contestant from the red team made a request to speak to the contestant from the white team. She wanted them to cooperate for the next turn so that they wouldn't just move 1 step per turn because it was obvious that it was just detrimental to both parties. She argued that it was better for them to duel as soon as possible than to drag on and suffer more losses. The contestant from the white team agreed after hearing her proposal and told her that he would call for 3 squares. However, the contestant from the white team broke his promise and only called for 1 square while the contestant from the red team complied with their agreement and called for 3 squares. As a result, we got to see this discrepancy. After Mr. Dot finished his explanation, Zhong Junkai's face grew red with anger. He glared at the young man from the white team and shouted, "Mr. Dot, isn't there any sort of punishment for such an agreement violation? Even though it is morally wrong, but that is not in the rules." Both teams heard Mr. Dot's reply loud and clear. "What, but that's cheating." Zhong Junkai was about to rush over to protest, but his girlfriend held his hand. He turned and looked at the others. with some doubts. He noticed their darkened expressions. Old Wang clicked his tongue as he commented softly, that Miss Lin looks cold-blooded, but she actually just a naive woman. That was a good suggestion, but can't she see that this is not the right occasion? That's right, Chen Fan added, she was just asking to be cheated. It would have been embarrassing if that bastard didn't take the chance to backstab her. Zhong Junkai's eyes widened and was dumbfounded. After a few seconds, he turned to look at his girlfriend. Please don't confront Mr. Dot. What will I do if something happened to you? Lara pleaded quietly. Her words were like a breeze which instantly extinguished the flames of Zhong Junkai's fury. He looked at everyone for a moment and finally sighed, saying nothing. Rabbit was resting at a side with his eyes closed. He did open his eyes to take a glance but quickly closed them, as if he was falling asleep. Mr. Dot spoke again as if he knew that their conversations ended. The contestant from the white team advanced 3 steps. He reached a lottery booth, bought a lottery ticket, and won a treasure chest. White team contestant, do you wish to open this chest? The young man replied gleefully, and everyone could tell that he said, yes. Congratulations, you've received +2 points. However, due to the witch's curse, you've only received 1 point and now your score is -1 point. Even though he only received 1 point, it was already a great surprise to him. The young man did not expect that his choice would bring him this much luck. A broad smile immediately surfaced on his face, and his expression relaxed considerably. The contestant from the red team displayed extraordinary bravery on the public bus. She caught a pervert, a gangster, and a thief. The police awarded her with +3 points. Now, the red team's score is 1 point. The young man's smile went rigid. Current stats after 8 turns. Red team, 2 prizes, 1 point, a chance to pass, a chance to take a 5 minutes break mid-game, 8th square. White team, 3 prizes, -1 point, a chance to undo 1 move, bound by a -1 curse, 10th square. Haha. She's quite lucky. In 1 turn, our score went up to 1 point. Old Wang slapped his own thigh as he laughed, his wet round belly wobbled with his laughter. If we think about it, the young chap is still 6 squares away from the finishing point. If he steps on a few skips, we might still have a winning chance. Chen Fan nodded his head in agreement, and just as he said, I hope so, he saw Lin Sanjiu from the corner of his eyes and was flabbergasted. He was not the only one. Everyone in the arena was a little shocked. This was because Lin Sanjiu repeated the same action. She called for Mr. Dot and said something. Then, she turned to the young man and talked to him for a long time after she got Mr. Dot's approval. As they could not hear what she said, the members of the red team could only stare hard at the young man's face. They scrutinized every micro-expression and every detail, down to the water droplets which rolled down his face. The young man looked as though he couldn't believe what he was hearing. He stood on the spot stunned for quite some time. He stared at Lin Sanjiu from head to toe a couple of times before he finally nodded his head again. Lara's heart thumped anxiously, as she pulled her boyfriend's sleeve. Honey, she wouldn't, right? How can there be such a stupid person? The members of the red team could only think of one possibility, and their faces turned pale. Once again, Mr. Dot announced with his ever-enthusiastic tone, 3 steps forward for the white team. 1 step forward for the red team. If everyone could hear the contestant from the white team, they would hear his loud, obnoxious laughter as he moved 3 steps forward in a hurry. He was already on the 13th square and was only 3 steps away from victory. Chen Fan stood up. Popped veins laced his forehead as he sprinted toward the contestants' field. Unexpectedly, no one in his team went to stop him. But before he could reach Lin Sanjiu, a sudden flash of lightning came from within the white fog. It struck him directly, and a smell of burnt flesh pervaded the air. Lin Sanjiu looked at Chen Fan indifferently. He was quite near to her so she could see that smoke was rising from his clothes. She ignored him and turned toward the young man who was reaching the finish point soon. I am giving the red team a warning, if anyone tries to get close to the contestants again, the punishment will be death. With that said, Lin Sanjiu knew that Chen Fan would definitely walk back to the team compliantly without even looking behind her. The contestant from the white team found 1 point from his grandmother's inheritance, plus 1 point for the white team. The current score for the white team is 0, Mr. Dot revealed the prizes and punishment for the current turn. When the contestant from the red team went to the bank to deposit some money, she was the lucky 100th customer, so she won a treasure chest. Do you wish to open this chest? Yes, Lin Sanjiu replied mildly as she looked at the square in front of her. Congratulations, the contestant from the red team won a prize. Despite the peculiar reactions from the others, Lin Sanjiu remained composed. Current stats after 9 turns. Red team, 2 prizes, 1 point, a chance to pass, a chance to take a 5 minutes break mid-game, 9th square. Contestant Lin Sanjiu received 1 individual prize. White team, 3 prizes, 0 points, a chance to undo 1 move, 13th square. For the next 10th, 11th, and 12th turn, both teams moved only 1 square per turn. From the looks of it, Lin Sanjiu already realized her mistake and didn't give her opponent another chance to deceive her. Unfortunately, there was already a 4 square distance between them. The outcome of the game seemed fixed, and there was nothing they could do. However, both parties got quite a few rewards in the 3 turns. They either got treasure chests or some advantage, so everyone was somewhat ecstatic. Current stats after 12 turns. Red team, 2 prizes, 3 points, a chance to pass, a chance to take a 5 minutes break mid-game, 12th square. Contestant Lin Sanjiu received 2 individual prizes. White team, 3 prizes, 2 points, a chance to undo 1 move, a chance to get external assistance, 16th square. White team contestant received 1 individual prize. The white team was already on the 16th square, that meant that the game Your Fate Depends on Sugoroku would end in the next turn, with the white team as the winner. None of the members of the red team looked fine. It was apparent to them that Lin Sanjiu lost on purpose to avoid death duel. For the 13th turn, white team stays on the spot. 1 step forward for the red team. That announcement drew everyone's attention, some of them even looked shocked. Didn't Mr. Dot say that the contestants cannot call for 0? The contestant from the red team used the chance to pass and did not have to choose a number for this turn. Therefore, the contestant from the white team will just have to remain on the spot. Mr. Dot cleared up the confusion kindly. The young man was just 1 step away from the finishing point. He looked at Lin Sanjiu with a frown. This last struggle had no purpose other than delaying the inevitable, right? Lin Sanjiu averted his gaze and listened to Mr. Dot. The contestant from the red team accidentally spilled some wine on an old man during a company dinner, so she got to know the 3rd richest man in the world. In the end, they got married, so the contestant from the red team got a wedding gift of plus 1 point and a treasure chest. Do you wish to open this chest? Yes. Congratulations. The contestant from the red team received 1 individual prize. The young man's eyes widened, and he quickly said something to Mr. Dot in an agitated manner. Oh? The contestant from the white team chose to use his chance to undo 1 move. Everyone was taken aback when they heard Mr. Dot's words. Unfortunately, as your opponent determines your steps, you can only move backward if your opponent uses that chance to undo 1 move. If that is the case, do you still want to use it? Part 5 of the series ends here. If you enjoyed it, please give us a like and subscribe so we can be motivated to make even better videos in the future.